All right, I'll get started. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining the Commercial Aviation Work Group meeting. Work group members and members of the public, please be sure to sign in if you haven't. At the front, there's a sheet for the public and a sheet for the members. For the members of the public in person, please remain seated and silent throughout the meeting and silence your phones. There will be an opportunity for public comment after the lunch break from 1:05 p.m. to 1:35 p.m. and I will alternate between in-person and online public comment. Work group members, please note there are no extra microphones in this room, only the OWL video and microphone system, so please speak loudly and clearly so everyone can hear you in person and online. For the public online, please keep your microphone and video off throughout the meeting unless you are called on during public comment. And hybrid meetings can come with unique challenges, so I appreciate everyone's cooperation and patience if any technical difficulties arise. For those work group members online, please keep your video on and microphone on mute unless you're speaking during the meeting. And if you have a comment or question, please speak freely, or you can also use the hand raise button. As a reminder, members of the public will be muted unless you are called on during public comment, in which I will unmute you to speak. Otherwise, please be respectful during the meeting. The emergency exit is in the corner of the room where you arrived, and the bathrooms are right to the right of the door. Now I will pass it on to Evan.
Morning, everybody.
Morning.
Morning. All right, so we have we have a few items on our agenda today, and then our tour, which I'm excited about. The first item is introducing new non-voting members. And we've had, I suppose, some mixed response on the non-voting member invite front. I have the kind of emails that we've exchanged on that. We have the results of that, but does someone else want to summarize it so I'm not monologuing? We got some acceptances, we got some declines, and then we have some ideas about who.
Mr. Chair, may I suggest that we do a round of introductions in general first?
Oh, sure.
Just for those that might be watching and those that are new to the table.
That's a good point.
I'm Ann Richard. I'm the aviation director with WashDOT, and I am a new non-voting member on the CAWG.
Ben Brookman with Alaska Airlines, Managing Director of Airport Real Estate and Network Planning. First meeting.
All right. Well, welcome.
Thank you.
Horace Dunham, Citizens Representative, terms expired.
Here we go again.
Yeah.
Good morning, Arif Gals for the Seattle Aviation Division voting member.
All right. I'm Evan Norby, Citizen Representative and the chair of the group.
Alicia Crank, Citizen Representative, and happy to be back in my old stomping grounds as I used to be on the Snohomish County Airport Commission. So welcome.
Gary Ward, I'm a citizen representative from Eastern Washington. I live in Yakima.
Maria Batiola. I'm a representative from a statewide environmental organization called Front and Center.
Oh, I suppose. Rich Mueller, Airport Director, Grant County International Airport, Port of Moses Lake.
And then our folks who are on remotely.
Sure, I'm Buck Taft. I'm the port representative.
Alan Adolph. I'm the Regional Transportation Manager for Yakima Valley Conference of Governments. I'm a non-voting representative for the Eastern Washington MPOs. And I will need to step out of the meeting at about 10:30 for another commitment for about a half hour.
I think we have at least a couple more members who are remote.
Hi, this is Robin. I'm the Commerce member.
Want to try that again?
You're right, you were cutting in and out a little bit.
Oh, sorry. Is this better?
That's better.
Okay. I don't know what went wrong. This is Robin Toth. I'm the director for aviation and aerospace at the Department of Commerce until June 30th. So thank you for including me in this, and I'll let you move on to the next person.
It looked to me like Representative Dent had raised his hand.
Okay.
So,
So if you see that box that says okay.
Yeah,
correct.
I'm admitting them.
Oh, okay.
okay.
It just pops up late. Are you waiting for someone or?
Well, I can't quite see the across the top there who may be raising their hand or who might be.
Representative Dent had his hand raised there, Christina.
Okay, Dent, you should be able to unmute yourself.
Good morning. This is Representative Tom Dent, the rep of the 13th Legislative District, and I'm from Moses Lake. You probably haven't received the letter yet, but I will be appointed to this committee from the Speaker of the House. Probably be receiving a letter here soon. So, thank you.
All right. So, good morning and welcome. So you may have to call on the people who are remote because we can't see all of who's logged in.
Yes, who do you want? I mean,
Other members of the CAWG?
Yeah, Colombo.
and I see Alan. Now, Alan and Buck are the only other ones who have their video on, but everyone else should be able to speak from online.
Okay. Okay.
Who are you wanting to talk with?
Well, Ms. Palumbo, and then I saw Mr. Reardon was logged in, and there may be others. I think that Zoom.
Everything was fine on my end. Everyone's in.
So Christina, I think he's just asking for people who are members of the group to introduce themselves
Yeah.
if they're online.
Yeah, I think they all did that. Alan, Buck, Robin, Charles. Those are the only 4 online members.
We haven't heard from Charlie.
Yeah.
Okay. I don't. He has ability to unmute himself. So, Charlie, if you're there, please unmute yourself because you have the ability. He may not be there. I haven't heard from him. So.
Okay. Just got that. Okay. All right. Well, welcome everybody. Thank you for reminding me. Okay. So we've had some non-voting members accept their invitations. Straight off. It's Richard. And then we've had a couple of declines. Ms. McGordy and Mr. Marcy. Ms. McGordy, I suppose, has suggested someone else might be able to line up somebody else from the PSRC. Gary, do you hear any further on that?
I haven't, but Christina passed along an email where the person we invited, who's the lead transportation planner from PSRC, declined, but also offered to provide some other name, at least one name. So my suggestion is that we follow up with PSRC and ask for another nomination. Presumably that would be a transportation planner. So I guess who has the action to do that? Should I do it or Christina? Christina would probably be better if you did that.
Sorry, I'm managing. There's a lot of people.
Well, not now.
What were you asking?
The question is, can you reach out to PSRC to see if they would nominate someone else to be a non-voting member?
Yeah.
Because the person that we invited has declined.
Okay.
But to me, I think PSRC has an interest in being on this work group.
Yeah. Do you have a certain email of someone I could email there?
I'm sorry?
Do you have an email or contact there? You can email and ask.
I can send you one.
Okay, perfect. Then yes, I can do it.
Okay. And then, we had a discussion at the last meeting about, as between, I think Mr. Marcy and Mr. Hodgman. And
Yeah, we had a discussion about whether to invite Mr. Hodgman or Jim Kuntz from Wenatchee. And
East of the Mountains.
my understanding is that Mr. Kuntz has not responded after 2 attempts from Christina. So my suggestion, Mr. Chair, would be that we ask Mr. Hodgman if he would like to be a non-voting member.
And that's for the representative from Eastern Washington.
Yeah, I think it's an Eastern Washington Airport director or something like that. I don't know what the exact title is. Alicia, you might have it there.
I do not, but I can find out.
I think we invited Mr. Kuntz because he was from Wenatchee, east of the mountains.
Right.
And so is Mr. Hodgman. So
yeah.
So I guess I make a motion that we invite Robert Hodgman to be a non-voting member.
Second.
Okay. Second. Any discussion on the motion? So I hear a motion to close discussion and vote. All in favor of inviting Mr. Hodgman?
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, motion passes unanimously. Okay, we can extend an invitation to Mr. Hodgman to join in the Eastern Washington Airport representative non-voting slot.
Mr. Chair, may I ask a couple of administrative questions?
Sure.
Sorry, Christina. One is, will we be able to get an updated member list? At some point, does that mean obviously at this point?
Updated member list as in.
Like kind of the new people that have been added on and.
Yeah, I think I sent the last updated one recently, but I can send it again. Yeah. The last time it was updated, I sent it to everyone.
You did, okay.
Yeah.
And then second is, has there been any going back to just something that Oris brought up, is there any update to our never-ending pursuit of figuring out the term dates for existing members?
Yeah, that's a great question. I haven't heard anything from the legislature. They haven't given us any feedback on that.
I'll follow up with you outside of this meeting because now that the new administration is in place, I feel like the excuses for them not cleaning this up is over. I'm being quoted online for saying that, so I'm just going to say it. So if you would send me whoever it would be that you would get that update from, I would be more than happy to follow up with them. Because
are you talking about reappointments of current members?
Yes.
And yes, I have that. It's actually the next item for us to bring up.
Oh, I did not see that on here. So
it's not on the.
Okay.
It's on my notes for things to fill into the.
Do we have an update or it's just okay?
So, I guess we have one more potential non-voting member to
chair.
Yes. To talk
Yes, I also had nominated Chris Herman for the position of Washington State Aviation Alliance, and he has declined. I asked him to provide a name of someone else from the alliance that might be willing to participate, but I have not heard from him. So I guess my suggestion, and this is a suggestion, I guess would be a motion, that we could invite Warren Hendrickson, who is also a member of the Washington State Aviation Alliance and served on the prior commercial aviation coordinating committee. Whether or not he's interested or not, I don't know, but he seems to be a logical candidate. So, if anybody wants to discuss that.
I don't have a name, but I know that the Alliance had, in anticipation of this, kind of decided who their representative was going to be. And so the alliance was waiting for this group to ask them, who will we send, rather than to send a specific invitation. So if we just reached out to the alliance and said, give us somebody, I think they're ready to go with that.
Okay. Okay.
So who has the action on that? Christina? Or
I already say, there's a lot of emails coming at me.
Christina, can you contact the Washington State Aviation Alliance and ask them to provide a member of the alliance that would be willing to participate in our group?
Sure, yeah. Alicia, are you tracking who you guys want me to email?
I can
Okay,
I was
perfect,
not. I think I've been volunteer. No, I have not been tracked.
Someone please track, and I can definitely send them
Go
out.
ahead.
Okay. Anything else we want to talk about on the dividing non-voting members? At least at this meeting, because I think this is going to be an ongoing subject.
If I understood Representative Dent correctly, we can expect a letter that would contain perhaps the 4 legislative nominees.
That's actually a good point. Representative Dent, is the letter is it going to be everybody, or just yourself, or just from the House?
I know that that the speaker was gonna put a letter out appointing me to the commission, and I'm sure she will appoint the member from the Democrat caucus as well. I can't answer for the Senate.
So I suppose we should probably follow up with the state Senate.
Yeah.
I'll read you the letter that I received. It says, I anticipate you will receive a letter of appointment signed by the speaker by mid to late June, after which you should receive further information from the group coordinator. So that's what I know.
Oh. Okay. Turning to, and this is I should follow my own notes, actually. I had this question about appointments and reappointments, other updates. I am, after rounds of some rounds of email tag, have scheduled a meeting for next week with Megan Cotton of the governor's office to talk about the question of appointments to vacant voting member slots, and also reappointments of existing members. The message to date is that we should all expect to be reappointed and should continue participating even if our appointment has formally lapsed. But I plan on emphasizing the importance to, I think, the formal public process role of our group, that if the legislature provided for us to be appointed by the governor appoints us to a particular term, that we should be appointed for a term and then be reappointed. If they want to make the terms longer so that it's less of an administrative burden, that's fine. But I think that's an important procedural step.
And Mr. Chairman, further to that, I think we had a discussion last meeting that it's inappropriate for members whose terms have expired to be voting. It gives the appearance of a conflict of interest. So that's another reason that we need to have these terms reappointed, members reappointed.
Yeah. So that's so there's nothing new yet, but that is the message until I can kind of have a meeting and maybe we can break the logjam.
Mr. Chairman, I think if we look at the list, at least 2 more, including yourself, go off next month.
Yes.
And yeah. So we will be down to less than 10 members that are actually.
According to my count, we will have 4 voting members as of July 1st.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, anyway, I didn't vote at the last one, by the way, because I remember last time we decided that if your term hadn't been reappointed, My term was really 2 months long. I really enjoyed it while it was there. We didn't have a meeting during
We didn't
that
have a meeting,
time.
yeah. If a tree falls in the forest.
Thank you for your contribution.
And just so that everything doesn't just lie on you, I would advise inviting others on this group to maybe one or two people maybe join you on that call, so that it's not just you.
Sure.
And it shows a bit more of a united front on our part that we want these answers and we want them now. I am not volunteering myself this time around.
I was gonna say.
I'm stepping back, but I think others on this work group would be more than willing to join you on that call.
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman, I wrote a rather lengthy letter to the governor about this last week. And so I heard that they had received it and they would get back to me.
Awesome.
Great. Anyone wants to, I mean, I have a couple of times to talk to me at lunch or something if you want to be part of the meeting with the governor's office next week. Okay. We are at the discussion of the consultant RFP, and the most recent version of the draft RFP was circulated.
Mr. Chairman, I reviewed what wrote on it. I agree with that, but I think we maybe a little bit have the cart before the horse to be talking about an RFP at this point in time, since we haven't even established exactly what it is we're going to do and who's going to do it. Are we going to put our RFP out to ask them to help us? I'm not sure that I feel we're far enough along, but I don't get to vote, so you can do whatever you want.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to ask Ann, since you proposed this RFQ, in your opinion, is it, to me, the way this RFQ reads is would be for a contractor who's a transportation consultant for whatever we ask them for. And there's some lead time to do that, to get that organized. So although I agree, there's some holes in our direction moving forward, it seems to me we do kind of need to contract with someone that's an expert in transportation advice to help us along. And to me, it ought to be a contractor that knows a little bit more than just aviation, because our task is to consider other multimodal options also. So I kind of think for us that part of the purpose of this RFP is to get someone that can coach us what direction we should be going. So we're hiring a coach here.
There are plenty out there that want to do this. I have been contacted by 3 of the big companies that said, "What are you guys doing?" I said, "I don't know. We don't know." Maybe I shouldn't say that.
Representative Dent has his hand up. Representative Dent, you should be able to unmute yourself.
Sure, thank you. I just want to give you a little insight to what's going on with the appointment process and such. Number one, we have a new governor, and which means we have an entirely new staff in the governor's office. And so most of those folks in there have never done this before. And so they're kind of coming up to speed on how this all happens and relying on talking to a lot of folks to make this happen. I don't want to get out over my skis, but I have requested the governor, some of the staff to take a look at this and see if we can't expedite some of our appointments on this committee. So, I know we all want to get there. We want this to happen. Nobody more than I do. But give them a little slack, a little grace here, and as they get their feet under them and learn how to do their job. So that's kind of what's going on over there.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Did everyone get the recirculated draft RFP with it included a couple of red line comments? I think that Gary did. did everyone receive that? Have a chance to look at it?
Yes.
Yeah.
Received it yet?
What's the date?
Have not.
What's the date of the email?
I sent it out a couple times. I've got it in front of me here, but I don't have it. It's the word, March 11th is the last one.
That's in my head.
I have an email. May.
That was the second one. I sent it out twice.
Okay.
They're the same.
Okay.
Have it.
And there's not many changes that I propose, just a few wording clarifications.
You broadened it in one spot, which I think is appropriate.
Yeah, the contractor must have a broad understanding of both air and surface transportation systems in major So I wanted to widen it beyond just aviation.
I support that. It's consistent with the bill that passed to look at both aviation and transportation needs.
I'm trying to figure out how to forward you a copy of it. Do you know what the public Wi-Fi is? A public Wi-Fi in this room?
Yeah,
Yes.
it should be just public.
Yeah.
Okay, and it just logged on.
Yeah.
You just love it.
Well, you have to accept the conditions,
Okay.
but there's no password.
I guess I'm kind of in the. I think to me, of course, the RFP is written broadly enough that we can get out there, start soliciting input, and as we need to tweak the what we're having them do for us and how we kind of do that a little bit on the fly, but we should get it out there and start soliciting input.
Well, if we can finalize it, Ann and I will both be in 2 weeks at a meeting where all of those people will be knocking on our door while we walk through the exhibit hall. And they already have, so we can certainly say here, but we need to tell them what to do when they get a hold of it, how to respond. And I really had a question with all that's going on in our government. Are all the requirements back within this about meeting certain requirements of different, I don't remember the initials that you have on there, that they have to meet so many veterans and minorities and women. Is that still in existence with the state?
This, the state isn't receiving any federal funding for this. So changes to the federal grant assurances and things like that, if that's what you're talking about, that doesn't affect this.
I did see a reference to Governor Inslee on the first page, and that might be clarified to like then Governor Inslee said. That might. How sensitive people are to having their feathers ruffled, issues like that.
And I'm really curious, are there any other languages we ought to put this in? Other than the 7 that are listed at the bottom, or
That WashDOT does have processes to make sure that all of those things are.
Then what's your?
That's Benjamin Brookman.
Yeah, last year that's one. Does anyone else have substantive? Substantive feedback. So
I have a question. The answer is probably yes, but I just need to ask it. So my understanding is you wanted an RFP that is broad enough that whatever strategy we take, we can do it. And is it inherent understanding in the state that the consultant can always subcontract? Okay, thank you. Appreciate it.
So I think the RFP would be the basis for us writing task orders to that contractor. That might then require that they go out and subcontract with someone else to provide that particular task, right?
Right.
That's kind of the way I see it.
Like legal advice,
Mm-hmm.
perhaps.
Or if the prime contractor would say, didn't know anything about rail, they could go out and hire somebody who does.
I had a question before the meeting that I posed to Ann again, now that we're all convened. And by the way, welcome. We did a round of introductions before you came in. Do you want to, we have some new members. Do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Yeah, sorry to be late, and glad I found you all. Allie Lee, and I am representing organizations in the community. And did you want my background?
Oh, no, just
that's
what
it.
seat you're holding in things. All right.
Thanks.
And the question about funding for the RFP, you want to tell the group what you told me?
Yeah, and this is a little convoluted, so I apologize for those of you that don't speak government every day. But WashDOT does have a budget for this group to use to hire a consultant. It's not enough to do probably everything we're going to need, but it's enough to get started. We just now, like last week, the governor signed a new budget. Excuse me. And so what they did is reappropriated the funding that we had from the last fiscal year. So that's still available. That's going to be in the ballpark of $700,000, which I think we're going to need more than that, but that will be enough to get us started. I have spoken several times with members of the legislature about the budget needs for this group, and the legislature will meet again next winter to look at to make budget amendments. So I told them that by that time, this group expects to have a consultant on board where we'll have a whole scope of work, and we should be able to have a budget to know how much to ask for. So that's kind of what we were shooting for. The timeline now with the new state administration is that they're asking us to put together our budget request for January right now. So, so we, like as a placeholder, I've put in another $1 million. So we'll have in the ballpark of 2 million, and if that's not enough, we'll ask for more when we get there. Does that sound good enough with the group?
Having not contracted for things like this before, in my prior life, my expert witness requests were in the $10,000. So I defer to the people who are experts on this stuff to know if that's the kind of money we're talking about, and obviously we're not obligated to spend all of it either. So
I think it's hard to know how much money we need if we don't know what we're doing. That's kind of like 700,000. I can probably tell you that's not enough to do much of anything, but I don't know what our scope is. And then one comment that was brought up was they'll just hire this person later. I think we need to be clear in the RFQ what we are looking for. Are we looking for them to have a team member that specializes in rail? Do we want them to have a team member that specializes in highways? We just need to be clear in the RFP when we put it out so they can put the right team together. Then every team that we will evaluate will have the same requirements. And if they have good team members, that makes the team as a whole better. So just think of that as what all do we want this to be? We can rush and get it out, but then we're not going to have a good product when we're done. I think it's very important to think through the scope and make sure we have a good plan of what we want before we move forward. Thanks.
Mr. Chair, having gone through this before in my federal government career, once the RFP goes out on the street, and correct me if WashDOT works differently, but there's a process where people who are responding to the RFQ can come in and ask questions to clarify the RFQ. And then we, as a work group, respond to all of the offerers to clarify that particular issue. And this can go on for some period of time with, depending on the complexity of the RFQ, several hundred questions that they might propose. You know, do I need to know how to build a railroad? And then we respond back to everybody that says, this is what we expect. So in that context, I think, at least in my opinion, I think the RFQ we have here is a good starting point. And then we go from there with questions and answers, or broadening it out of clarification as necessary once we start getting responses and questions from the offerers. Does that make sense, Anne? I mean, you've done this probably more than I have.
So we've thrown out a couple of different terms here: RFQ and RFP. Right, an RFP is a request for proposals. An RFQ is a request for qualifications. The washed-out process for this is to put out a request for qualifications. So with that, we're asking for firms to tell us, this is the team we put together. These are the qualifications we have to do this. And you're exactly right. Then from there, then we can firm up the scope a little bit. And there usually is, you're exactly right, Mr. Wood, some back and forth, like, can you clarify this?
RFI.
Exactly. Yeah.
I'm going to write RFQ in big letters. And try to refer to it by the correct acronym.
At the previous meeting, as a representative of environmental statewide organization, and I brought up the HEAL Act because of the health disparities. We have not, I have not submitted a proposal of language to our chair, so it can be considered here. I'm bringing it up, Anne, because not just the technical airport transportation, but we may have an overlay of the value of transportation connecting to health disparities, access, and opportunities.
Absolutely.
That will help it. So to me, that's having done that work and the impact on environmental justice in terms of land, air, areas, and so on. That's another chunk of change. So just keep it in mind.
Right.
Thank you.
And I have, you had emailed me a question about legislative language, and I have done that research, and I have a bunch to talk about when there are, I kind of slotted it under our next steps.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Yeah. So putting out an RFQ now, we get initial submissions as well as questions, and we can refine, we can start this process and kind of refine as it goes, and that as we do, that would perhaps address some of the concerns that Mr. Taft and Mr. Dunham raised on about not, and we have to start before we need to get started before we can refine to then get to a finished product, before we have to eventually select a consultant. Is that
That's the process that I was envisioning, because my feeling is it would be almost impossible to do a definite scope right now, because this group needs to do some literature review and, you know, some education first to inform the next step. So it'll be kind of an iterative process.
anyone else have thoughts on whether we should?
Well, I agree with Ann. I mean, we need some history here, some education, if you will, about the 4 years of work that the CACC did that ended up with no recommendation. So we don't want to go back and reinvent the wheel for another 4 years. We need to pick up where they left off and see what kind, now that the legislature has given this group somewhat of a broader authority than the CACC had, we ought to take advantage of that and start to consider what can we do in addition to building a brand new airport that nobody west of the Cascades seems to want. So what else can we do? What are the other options? So
very much lines I'm trying to keep my own brain in line. I just keep reading through our charter. I'm sure you're exactly where we are.
And I might add, Mr. Chair, so there is the work of the CAWG, so that's important. PSRC has done a lot of work over the years. There's also regulatory issues that I don't think have been realistically considered, like the Airline Deregulation Act of 1978. This group, or the Washington legislature, or the governor doesn't have the ability to tell airlines where to operate. Right. So all of the discussion about where we build a new airport kind of leaves out that side of it, is who's going to operate there. So I think there's a lot of that kind of work that we've got to go through first.
And related to that, you build an airport with federal funds, you can't tell an airline they can't operate there, which is here we are at Paine Field. There's a lot of history there. So,
and so I might add, and this is maybe out of turn, and so I apologize, but if the state were going to invest money in solving this issue, then maybe is that investment, instead of being in infrastructure, maybe it's in incentivizing airlines to operate in a way that reduces the congestion at Sea-Tac. So I think there's a lot of different things to consider that I want to make sure we don't head down a path that closes other doors.
So we also washed up some all over the past too. Don't want to forget that Washington Navy is just done in the past too.
Thank you, Rich.
Yeah, you guys are. You were going to toot your own horn, so yeah. Put that out. That work's been done on our behalf already.
So am I clear? I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Oh no, that maybe I was going to say the same thing. There's a couple things I'm hearing. Are we saying that we would send out the RFQ, but then work collaboratively on the scope of work with whoever we're considering? I mean, there's things that are missing on here, like the advancement of electrification and hydrogen that's coming up at airports, and all of these other factors that aren't in here, community outreach and engagement. How that then, do they have those skills and abilities to really interact with the public? Is that what we're asking them to do, as giving references back to us, because they would be somebody else who people would then be connecting with. So are we looking at the scope ahead of time before we release this, or are we looking at then creating the scope collaboratively with the person or people that we're interviewing?
That was my question too. Huh? You just said it better than
So I think if I can say, if you're going to hire someone and then say, you're on board now, let's figure out what you're doing. It seems odd, right? I mean, when we put out an RFQ or RFP, we have staff to sit down and we figure out what the scope is, right? And then we figure out what's with maybe the contractor, once they've been selected, what the appropriate rates and everything are. But we have to know ourselves what is the asking for, right? So I'm hearing two different things here. One, we have a body of work to do, but then people are not educated on the industry. They don't really know what it is that we're trying to do. So maybe we go back to, are we hiring someone to help us really put a framework around what is it that we're trying to achieve? Then you go out and hire someone to help you technical stuff and everything. Because right now I see confusion about, we've been meeting, we've been creating quite a while ago, but we really don't know what our mission is in terms of going out and doing the work. Except this very broad idea of give us some, we're an advisory, we have no authority, by the way, right? We have someone earlier on said we have no authority, we're an advisory body, right? But it seems like to me like we're not really ready to engage in any meaningful work until we can really put down on paper what is it that we're asking someone to help us with, to get the data.
Mr. Chairman, going back to the original bill that established us, it said to evaluate the needs of a commercial aviation in the state, especially looking at what we're talking about hiring people, but what we need to do is find out what the needs are. Who has asked Western Washington? Who's asked Olympia? Who's asked, various parts of Western Washington what their needs in aviation are? Are we going to be just sitting back and say, well, we think we need to do something to help Sea-Tac? Well, that's ours, but there may be some other needs. I look at the establishment of this, and it looks like that we should be asking the communities what it is they need. What do you need here as a community in air service? What do you need in cargo? What do you need in transportation is important, but it says air service, commercial aviation in our charge. Now, if we can find that a new highway might relieve some of the needs, that's one thing. But I think we need to look at what the needs are in the state. I don't think we should just with Western Washington, because if we do, it goes back to once you cross that mountain range, that's another country over there. Well, we know it is anyway, but we don't want to make it look like we're not even paying attention to it. So I really believe somehow this group has to decide what the needs are that we have to look for. And we could be asking this organization that we hired, what are the needs, and go out and do this work for us. But somebody's got to do it.
So I was looking back here at the RFQ as drafted, as currently drafted, it's page 2. Top page 2 is, I think, kind of the key paragraphs or set of paragraphs. And I know Anne may know who wrote this, Anne may have written this, but
you should get better on here.
Yeah. So the contract resulting from this RFQ will be to provide a variety of services and support. We'll facilitate the work group. Okay, that's fine. It's anticipated the contractor will not provide substantial research, but rather assist the work group in reviewing and understanding the research that's already been completed. The research will include topics such as airport master plans, regional aviation planning studies, regional transportation studies, and airport site selection studies. So that covers a lot of, I think, what we've been talking about. There are pre-existing documents out there going back historically. We got actually a public comment that was circulated to everyone in the group from someone who I think it appears was involved in one of the prior rounds of study of this, and pretty deep knowledge of events from 30 years ago. And I thought that was illuminating, and it circulated, I think it was the 1992 study. So it's interesting to read that, by the way, the 1992 document, and then look at how things have transpired in the interim. Some of the anticipated project in this community, Austin, Texas, for example, was then built later and had a work done. So the
Austin took over an Air Force base, right?
Exactly. In the 1992 document, they said, we think one of the solutions for Austin is to take over Bergstrom Air Force Base. So, and then they did. When it was closed by the government on its own, by the way. Not, yeah.
I'm going to shift the conversation just a little bit, still focusing on the RFQ.
Rip, before you do that, there's a few more points I wanted to get through in this paragraph. I diverged a little bit. So the contractor we were asking for must have a broad understanding of both air and surface transportation systems in major metropolitan areas in the U.S. and worldwide, as well as a comprehensive understanding of the U.S. airline industry and FAA regulations and policies regarding airline and airport operations. As a facilitator of the work group, the contractor shall recommend solutions using similar situations in other metropolitan areas and be able to provide professional guidance. Then, as the work group reviews existing data, they may recognize the need for new research on subject matter briefings. The contractor will provide this additional research through in-house resources used in subcontractors. Examples include law, air service analysis, construction timelines, advanced air mobility. So there's, small community air surface multimodal transportation planning, and the work group will rely on presentations from external groups, et cetera. So I think we do have a bit of the framework of what we're expecting them to do now, and then what anticipate asking them to do in addition. It's not a great deal of detail, but I think it's enough to get started in that direction.
They'd be happy to us paying to get started.
All right. So, Rhea.
Thank you. So here we are with climate.
Right.
None of this speaks to knowledge about climate, about adaptive strategies, and so forth. And so I want to build on what you were saying in terms of how we conceptualize the RFQ, that there is a technical portion, and perhaps we need to call it out. There's this technical portion, there's the facilitative and community engagement to find out needs, and there is the climate impact and health impact. Because the reason I bring that up is not to disrupt this process, but I'm looking at the product at the end, and we're going to get a lot of resistance. So, for example, there's a state law that says all cities should have climate plans. We have to consider that. We don't know what their analysis is of aviation contribution, transportation contribution overall to greenhouse gases large. So I think we'll miss the boat if we don't integrate those components at the front end work, so we reduce the resistance to our recommendations near the end of the work. I hope that's clear. And if not, I can speak more to it.
Can I? So I have a couple of recommendations to move this forward. Just because I know that I feel like in every of these meetings we have the same conversation and it just kind of goes circular and it doesn't go anywhere. So I think one would be that we create a subcommittee that can dive more into this and kind of drive this and come back with those recommendations so we can move this forward. Especially as a committee a group that only meets quarterly. I think that that's necessary so we're not consistently eating up time, kind of circularly talking about this. And I would hope that some of the folks on this work group would volunteer to be on that, to have very strong aspects to this, like climate, to be a part of that. And then two, and again, I appreciate that there's a new administration and they're trying to keep up, but I'm still going to hone in on the fact that we got to get the issues with our terms rectified sooner rather than later, because the one thing I don't want to see happen is see the work being put in by those who are volunteering on this work group to somehow get nullified because they worked on something post their official term, even though we were really told to keep moving. So I would just like to get those T's crossed and I's dotted from something that's frankly basic to continue to move the work forward. I would just really hate to see any of this time or work get nullified in some form, shape, or fashion because something was talked about by someone or voted on by someone who was officially out of term.
I think that's a good practical next step. But my interest is what we call common understanding of what's important to the group.
I just don't want to continue to get lost because I know you brought it up before, but I don't think it's been captured in a way that
I got you.
So that's all. I just don't want to have everyone continuously kind of having the same conversation over and over, and there's a general we being said, and we need to do this and we need to do that. But who is that we? So I want to start, putting some names around that we so that we can have some responsibilities assigned, so it doesn't just by default fall on Christina, who's doing all the other things, but for us to be able to utilize our expertise for the reasons we've been appointed to put that work forward, and not make anyone feel like their time is being wasted at the same time.
So I hear what you're saying. There's a lot of climate implications of the work that lies ahead of us in the different options that we might come up with. I think we address those as we get into that particular portion of our work. I don't see any reason to postpone the RFQ because we don't talk about climate in the RFQ. But I think that talk about climate comes when we get to the point where we're talking about actually what we're going to recommend or what we're thinking about doing or what the options are, because each of them will have some sort of climate impact.
So I'm going to go back to my statement, which is smaller actually, in terms of a possible solution is that in the RFQ, to be able to distinctly just say technical, community engagement, and other impacts, climate and health. I think if we simplify it, we'll get in there, and there's so much learning to do even before we can articulate specifics.
I just wanted to point out page 38 in your handbook, the Commercial Aviation Working Group summary, paragraph 2, what we're required to do. The working group is required to investigate the expansion. So if we bullet point these out as part of the scope, these are required things that we need to do, along with then maybe other items that we have in here to then have that full, or even a starting scope of work. Because then they can kind of see the requirements. Water quality is one, establishing greenhouse gas emissions goals, local planning related growth management act. Having those backgrounds of those is important for the person who is then responding to the RFQ because of the fact that that's part of what our required work is to investigate these.
So you're looking at the final bill report of ASHP's 1791, which
Right.
is in our
Right, page 38, summary, paragraph 2.
Yeah, I think that's all good. And I guess what I'm saying is we'll get there. We'll do that. But I'm not sure we do it right here in the RFQ.
I think it's okay to put in the RFQ. This is the expectation for the work group.
Yeah, I like it.
Yeah.
Well, my thought of where to put it would be, we have this list in the middle of page 2 of examples of additional work efforts that may be required, include but are not limited to, and we could put it right there above air service analysis, a one-line summary of climate and environmental impacts of.
Chair, I would recommend we put it in the background at the top of the RFQ of who we are and what we're required to produce. And then it's not unusual to do this with RFQs and RFPs.
You can do both.
Yeah.
Well, you could actually just quote this paragraph if you want to stick that in there. It's fine. It doesn't hurt anything. If that moves us forward, I'm all for it.
Yeah. Somewhere in the back of my mind, I think that remember from our very first meeting that a big chunk of this bill was vetoed by Governor Inslee.
Yes.
I think that this part of the bill report refers to a section that was vetoed, but we also kind of all discussed and agreed that we could decide to kind of use some of that vetoed language as a guide, kind of a guidepost, even though it wasn't statutorily required. And this would be an example of that.
Yeah, because if you don't understand the Growth Management Act for city, county, state.
Yeah,
then
that's a problem.
Could be, yeah.
So where exactly have we landed?
So is there a motion to take the paragraph that is at bottom of page 38 of our handbook, which is from the final bill report of ASHP 1791. It begins with the work group is required to and ends with incompatible with the operations of a military installation. And insert that into the RFQ.
Part of the introduction.
As part of the project, part of project description here, there's a so we pick where to put it. probably right after
the first paragraph.
After the first paragraph, after region and in front of the work group will consist of.
Yeah. Agree.
So moved.
Okay, we got a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Second. All in favor of amending the RFQ draft to insert that paragraph, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, motion carries unanimously. So, with that amendment, now, does anyone want to vote on adopting this RFQ and to put out through WSDOT processes, WSDOT, sorry, to then start soliciting input?
So moved.
Moved.
Second.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
The voice vote carry as it. Does the dissenter want to call for a recorded vote?
No, I didn't know if you wanted to know that it was me, so I was just letting you know that it was me.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. With one opposed, the voice vote carries in favor of adopting this RFQ and putting it out for request for qualification, so it's submission of qualifications.
Mr. Chairman, just, I think for future concerns, we were worried about people thinking that non-members were voting. I think maybe you should have note that they were just members that voted.
Yes.
All right? Because by saying yes, they don't know. You need to say it was only the members that voted or call for a count of the members. Because there's some of us here that can't vote.
True.
It's just to protect us in the future.
Right. So I guess
it's already done now, but in the minutes for future reference.
So a voting member would have to, if it's unanimous, it doesn't matter. We did have a dissenter. That's why I called on the one no vote if they wanted to call for a recorded vote, and they declined to call for a recorded vote. So I think that procedurally, we're in the clear.
You're the attorney.
And usually I'm the only vote that matters. So.
Oops.
No judging. No, exactly. I judge myself. All right.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Yes, this is Charlie Reardon. I didn't introduce myself. I've been here. I am a expired member, and just for the record, I have not voted. And,
Mr. Reardon, good morning, and thank you for not voting. All right. So great. I think this is were you following closely enough with? We probably have this HB 1791 bill report in Word format somewhere where that block of paragraph can be inserted into the RFQ.
Yeah, I'm managing a lot here, so
okay.
If someone could just
this would go back to my original recommendation of having a subcommittee that can be tracking this, or is that all Parliament?
Well,
yeah.
To simplify it, if you would like, Mr. Chair, I can insert that paragraph into the draft that I submitted.
You got it somewhere. Okay.
Thanks, Ann.
Okay.
How's this question? Is this meeting being recorded?
Yes.
So we vote perfect. Then we can always just.
It's all there.
But yeah, no pressure.
Okay. All right. Well, at this point, we are at our presentation from Paine Airport, which has been nice to host us today. Is Mr. Marcy present?
Yes.
Hi. Hi.
I'm Josh Marcy.
give me a second, I will pull up.
Yeah, no worries. For anyone who doesn't know me, whether online or here in person, my name is Josh Marcy. I'm the airport director at Paine Field. I've been at Paine Field for about 4 years, and prior to that, I was at the Port of Seattle down at Sea-Tac for 5-6 years. And then before that, City of Austin, which is why I knew the Austin Airport story. City of Austin bought the Air Force Base for $1 because they sold it to them for $1. So, and then before that, I was with Memphis International doing some things there too. So, started my career as a janitor in aviation, and here I am now. So,
Still cleaning up messes.
Still cleaning up messes. But Paine Field's been here. We're almost 100 years old. We've been here since the 30s. We started out a public works project to create economy in this area. This was actually the original, what is today Sea-Tac, but because of war, they turned it into a military base and made plans elsewhere. Alaska was here a long, long time ago, and they're back. And so we're glad to have them. But we're going to talk a little bit about our master plan. I'll give kind of a high level. We'll have some questions and answers at the end of this. This master plan was completed in 2014. We went through several public commenting periods, did the whole process, and finally finalized the master plan. Now, when we look at this master plan, this is a plan. So when you see pictures, I'll kind of go into some of these things. It doesn't mean we're going to design the building the way we have it mapped out. It just means in the future, we think we're going to need a building in that area to handle whatever that function may be. The FAA approves really two things in a master plan. One, they provide us the forecast, and then they approve the airport layout plan because of airspace restrictions, and they just want to make sure that we're doing things properly without impacting civil aviation negatively. So with that,
sorry, just real quick. Did you say 14 or 24?
14 or 20.
Did you say 2014 or did you mean
2024?
Okay.
Last year.
Okay.
Yes.
You said 2014. Okay.
Yes, and this is all online. If you want to go read the hundreds and hundreds of pages that we have, you can go to painefield.com, find the master plan tab, and take a look at it. And even during our commenting process, we, whatever the rules are, you keep it open for 30, 90 days. We tripled those in certain cases. We took comments that people emailed us outside of the commenting period and still included those as well. So if anybody wrote the airport, any comment that they had was included in this. So with that, we'll go ahead and move to the next slide. So this is our forecast summary here, and what we're looking at. You'll see PALs, and we'll talk about those planning activity levels. And so what this means for us is that these things will trigger us. When we get to a certain number of passengers, it means, hey, maybe you ran out of space or whatever that is, it's going to trigger something else. And so these activity levels are based off of the passengers that we have, and you'll see what we have here right now in 2019. So that's kind of when we started the master plan. So some of this is a little bit old, but still fairly accurate. And so we have about 140,000 ops here, and operation is considered a takeoff or a landing. So the plane lands and takes off, that's two operations, right? And so when you see the word operations, that's what we're talking about. And then we break those up into different categories. So you'll see general aviation, and then of course we have based aircraft. Paine Field's the biggest airport in the state of Washington in terms of based aircraft for general aviation. That number right there is probably a little closer to 600 now. So we do have that. We are the fourth most populous general aviation airport in this side of the Mississippi and 12th in the country. So we do have a lot of GA. Next slide. And then of course we're talking about our demand triggers. These have different functions. We have runways, terminal, we have land side. We're not just on the airfield. We have a lot of things outside of the fence. This building we're in, this is airport property. All the buildings you see around us in these different parking lots, these are all airport property. So they're tenants of ours. And so anyways, we're looking at this. The runway system that we have right now through the planning periods is sufficient. Obviously, we have a 9,000-foot runway, and we don't think that we're going to have any capacity problems with that runway during any of this 20-year planning period. Next slide. What we see right here, so this kind of talks about our capacity before we think we might need to make some type of move towards maybe expanding the terminal. And we think that's right around 2 million passengers, and we think this line right here is really about 2030. So we think the demand's kind of trickling down from us around 2030. There are some models, you'll see 2030 to 2034, where Sea-Tac hits that capacity, and we expect to see some demand come this direction. And we know that's a few years down the road. And so our airport right now is looking at these things. What we don't want to do is be behind the 8 ball when that demand shows up. So we've got a plan for that now. There's a lot of things we need to do as we move forward, environmental, different types of things to make sure we get there. So you'll start seeing the airport kind of moving to pave the way so that when this stuff gets here, we're not behind the 8 ball and we're ready for it. And also, we're going to let the demand tell us what to do. I'm not a believer of if you build it, they will come. I believe that if they come, then you should build it, but you should know they're coming and be prepared when they are. I'll take questions at the end if that's okay. So here we are. So we're kind of around 2030, and we think that around 2 million passengers, that's when our terminal will hit that capacity. Next slide. And so here's our planning activity levels. When we hit, PAL1, we're talking about there's going to be some type of activation, mitigation for our entrance, our terminal roads, and then also some of our terminal taxi lanes. So that's on the airfield. We get into planning activity level 2, then we're talking about doing some expansion at the terminal, doing some work for our general aviation area, and I'll show you where those are later. But there will be some movement in that area. And then planning activity level 3, then you'll start seeing airfield improvements, support, and parking, different things that's going to be required as more aircraft show up at our airport. Next slide. And so we kind of break our projects up into a couple different categories. We have capital projects. Those are big projects, multi-million-dollar projects, $100 million projects, you name it. Those are mostly funded by the airport and the FAA. So a lot of times when we do capital infrastructure projects on our airfield, it's a 90-10 match. So the FAA pay for 90% of whatever we improve out there, and then we have a match of 10%. And so that's our capital projects. And then we also have third-party funding. We have general aviation users. We have Propeller, who owns and operates the terminal here at our airport. We have a lot of different interests at the airport as well. Boeing is a huge partner of ours, and so there's other investment besides just government into our airport. So here's our planning activity level 1 program. You see here we're talking about the roadway here a moment ago. Currently the roadway comes in here, and then these are all labeled up here. Just that's what you see here. But this is our roadway, and then this is to help get more airplanes in and out of here, maybe a expansion of terminal ramp, and then maybe some more parking over here. But this, like I said earlier, just because we have it drawn here doesn't mean that's necessarily where it goes. What this is, it tells us that, hey, airport, you're going to have this many users, you're going to need X amount of more square feet. We think it ends up in this area. This road could be designed differently. This taxiway could be designed differently. It's not a design. So this isn't an actionable project.
As you're describing those for those online, could you say the numbers of the projects instead of where you're pointing?
Oh, understood. That's awesome. Yeah, so I'm talking about the roadway. That's your G01 through G03. And then the taxiway expansion is T01. And then the remote parking is A02. Next slide. And so anything you see that's highlighted that's orange or blue, this is new. Okay, the black and white, the gray, that's already existing. So we think in the future, once we get the planning activity 2, which means expansion for us at the terminal, there's an additional, we're not going to say a number of gates, but we think it could be 6 to 8 gates. Could be more, could be less, could be decided upon the type of aircraft that we're servicing at the time. Did the airline upgauge to bigger aircraft? Like I said, we'll respond to that demand when it gets here. But we do know that if we do expand the terminal, it's going to go this direction. We know that pretty confidently. And when it goes that direction, it's going closer towards the runway, not towards the road. That's T04, T03, and T02 for everyone online. And then also S03, we have RON parking, which is remaining overnight aircraft that show up. They get staged and they're ready to go for the next morning. So they park here at the airport. We park them in different places. Currently, we're parking them over here, but the thought process is here. And then also that could be a potential de-icing pad in the future, remote de-icing. Aircraft de-icing at a gate takes a very long time, impacts others from getting in and out of that gate. So remote de-icing is a very efficient thing. And that's something we're looking at something I think I learned at Sea-Tac that they do a lot, and it can be very challenging just due to how much movement is happening in that area. So that's something we're looking at. And then the other thing you'll see is AO3 and AO4. You'll see kind of a reconfigure of the taxiways there. They're a little bit more curved, whereas here, like just on Alpha 3, you see a 90-degree. That means an airplane's almost got to stop before it can make that turn. So that means less capacity on the runway, less throughput. And so what you do is you kind of make these high-speed taxiways that get aircraft in and out a little bit faster and in the right position. And then also on the other side, we're still looking at general aviation. We're not just commercial service here. We're looking at some general aviation services. There's not much in terms of expansion in general aviation here in that forecast. However, there is some growth in that area. And so in the PLG program, we'll be looking at this area for some type of growth.
May I ask a question now, just as long as we're looking at this diagram?
Say again?
May I ask a question now, just as long as we're looking at this diagram? I noticed those two high-speed taxiway exits are both for aircraft landing to the south. I guess, why would there not be a corresponding one for aircraft landing to the north?
Yeah, sure. Well, maybe in the future, but right now, most of our operations are in a south flow. Same thing as Sea-Tac. So we have the same runway configuration, 1634, so that's a magnetic heading on your compass. 160 degrees, and so the wind's going to the north, so they land into the wind most of the time. Same thing down in Sea-Tac. So just it's due to the flow. So we spent a bunch of money just for 20% operations, which just wouldn't pencil out. So that's that purpose. Next slide, please. Then we get into PL3, and so now we're really talking about a lot of airfield improvements, a lot of infrastructure improvements. PAL3 is kind of towards the end of our planning period, so we're looking at closer to the I guess 15 to 20 year mark is really later on. But again, that's all driven by demand. So if it shows up tomorrow, then we're really in trouble. But we really want to prepare for this, and so we're looking at different things. The SO6, SO9 area. This is general aviation. Currently, there's some empty spaces on our airfield right now. We're doing some environmental over here, but in the future, this could become available for general aviation. This SO7, that is currently Air National Guard, so it's the Department of the Air Force. They own that, but the county is in the process of purchasing that from the Air Force so that we can hopefully put some industrial type jobs or facilities over there to help with people working here at Snohomish County.
For $1?
Pardon?
Is it for $1?
Oh, well, no, not for $1. No. But we're working through that now, and we're in the process. The Air Force is cleaning up the property before they hand it over to us. But it might be a couple more years before we see that in our portfolio of leased land. But what that does for us here at SO7 is if you take this line, so all the black dotted lines you see around here, that's airport property. That line would then close, and it would open that up and make this whole piece of property one big piece of property. So there's a lot of opportunity there to do that. Also, you'll see here, there's some more support stuff that goes for the terminal. Over here on the left-hand side, you can see what those letters represent. But then looking at the airfield, we have some things currently. So these gray kind of green hashed out areas are taxiways currently that are there, and what we think we should change them to. And one of the reasons why we're moving some of them is the FAA has something called hotspots. A hotspot is an area that could be potentially unsafe if you're not really paying attention, and the more likelihood that you're in that area, you could have some confusion. So they designate these little hotspots on people's or airports' airfields for caution, but then also so that the airport can correct that hotspot. And so hotspots, they come directly off a tax or a ramp directly onto a runway. They try to build it in such a way that you have to turn and be deliberate versus accidentally just driving straight out there, right? And so that's why you see some of the movement of surfaces here. This taxiway goes straight across right now, SO6, A11. It just kind of comes straight across, but they'll sidestep it, and those are for safety reasons. So some of it is designed for safety, some of it's designed for efficiency, and we are looking at both of those. Next slide, please. So we have a capital improvement plan. We're always looking about 5 years out to see what our big capital investment projects are and if the FAA is going to fund it for us. And so usually they say, hey, it's funded, and they keep up with the same schedule as well, about 5 years out. And so we work on our capital improvement plan. And what we want to do is we want to address our future demand, the operational and safety improvements we just talked about, but also with those things, once we build it, we have to maintain it, and we have to keep the equipment maintained that maintains that infrastructure. So we put those things into our plan as well. These are all projects that we're talking about in 2022 dollars. The master plan. When did you start the master plan? 2019? 2019? Yeah, 2019 to 24. So about a 5-year process. So some of these numbers are from 2022 in the middle of COVID when we were doing this, but we're looking at about $315 million for some CIP. And that is just for us, not our third party costs. So we're looking at what the FAA is looking at to pay for these projects that we just kind of ran through. Those costs will take care of some soft costs, contingency, and of course taxes. Our airfield projects are a little over half of the total projects, both sides of the fence, but looking at about $178 million for that. And our runway rehabilitation, which we're actually working on now, it's a whole different, plan from this, but our runway is near the end of its useful life, and so we need to take it out of service, get it replaced, make sure it's safe for the next 30 or 40 years to come as well. So we're working on that right now. I can tell you that number is higher than 75 million. Again, we're talking 2022 dollars. And then we're also looking at third-party costs. Some of these costs are borne by the private terminal, right? And so the terminal operator, propeller, will have to take care of some of those costs as well. So we do think we have all the funding we need to get to where we're headed to. Next slide. And then here we go. So we're kind of looking at our planning activity levels and the different dollars amounts, and they're broken down into the airfield, the terminal, GT, ground transportation, some support. We have pavement management programs here to make sure the pavement continues to be managed and stay safe, and of course equipment that goes with that. And then we also have that broken down into which activity levels we're going to address those different things. And so we have a plan on when we're going to pay for those things, implement those things, and again, based off of the demand. Next slide. And so you can see here, this is kind of a breakdown of those costs again. The capital plan here, about $300 million. And you'll see that, we just kind of wanted to highlight that this, not all of us paying for it, but this is, even here, third party costs. So, there's other people paying for this as well, or other, next slide. All right. So, we talked about our funding sources just a little bit earlier. We talked about that 90-10 match of the split. And so when we're looking at our funding sources, we try to break them down on who's paying for what and for what projects, right? So we want to make sure that that's accounted for. These are the FAA and IAP. IAP is Airport Improvement dollars, program dollars. So those are the 90% match that we do the 10% match that gives 90%. We'll use those dollars for airport infrastructure. So it's going to be happening on the airfield, the runway, the taxiways, those types of things, right? And so that's what AIP dollars are used for. PFCs are passenger facility charges. So each passenger that goes through a checkpoint at TSA, I think it's $4.30, $4.50 per passenger comes through. Those dollars go directly into a bucket of money that is then intended to be used only for airfield improvement projects that directly benefit the carriers, because it's their passengers that are the ones flying, that we use those projects that improve the carrier's service. We also have some entitlements, discretionary, all FAA again. We have local airport funds, so we have a lot of things that happen here at the airport, landing fees, fuel flowage fees, different fees for different users that we help out with, and then also third party. If you guys want to give us money, we'll take it. So we're always good with that as well. Next slide. And then this is our future land use plan. And so this is kind of really the last slide I have for you. These are kind of a general idea of what type of thing we can build in these areas. And so if like here, you see the purple is general aviation. So right now it's already purple, it's all GA, that's where GA is. But here you'll see in the future, we don't have any hangars here right now, but that could be potentially GA hangars in the future. And when I say GA, general aviation, the small private business jets, personal owned aircraft, things like that. But we have that. And so we allocate, and then the FAA gives us a thumbs up, hey, this works. You can build it. It's compatible with all the other things happening in these areas. It's not going to be unsafe. And so you'll see aviation use development. If you notice an aerial, and we'll see it on the tour later if you're coming with us, this whole side of the airport, it's about 150 acres or so. It's all trees, it's all woods, it's a lot of elevation. So a lot of challenges over there, but we know that we want some aviation use development. We want access to the airfield. That's very important to us. Of course, runways, taxiways, and then our compatible development. You know, so we make a lot of real estate in these green areas as well. So next slide. And I will answer the final question before you ask it. How many passengers is that, right? 20 years out, we're expecting right now the master plan forecast says 4.3 million passengers. I think it's a little bit higher, but we kind of kicked around to 4.3 to 6 million passengers in the next 20 years. So that is the forecast. And with that demand showing up probably within the next 5 years. So we are continually to grow. We're getting more passengers through here since COVID. But we are still at about 65% of what we were before. So we're catching up, but not as fast as everyone else is hoping for. So with that, I'll take any questions.
Maria, do you have your question?
I have such a basic question. I don't want to embarrass myself.
No, all questions. Go ahead, please.
So, because what I'm trying to wrap my head around is when you look at capacity and you're using the term, the anticipated demand, are you using the PSRC data for the whole area?
No, see, the FAA is the one that puts the forecast for us. They're the one that approves that. And so how they go about doing that is handled back in DC. So I'm not sure of all their metrics to get to that number, but they're the ones responsible for that. And I could follow up with you and get you the information you need, though.
So the second half is the term constrained demand. Is the FAA's forecast drug constrained demand based on the safety basic, you know, that stuff.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
So it's the same.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I mean, they consider all kinds of things. Yeah,
Thank
definitely.
you so much.
Yeah, absolutely.
So this planning process, it's a 20-year period, but you think you're going to hit the demand number well within the 20 years?
No, I think the demand to expand will be within 20 years, and that's at about 2 million passengers. And so that's when we think that will happen. And that has to do with the terminal size. The terminal has 2 gates and 1 hard stand, 2 contact gates, 1 hard stand, right? So they can only handle so many passengers an hour, right? If you get over there right now and you see 2 737s at the same time, it's a tight fit. Now you get 2 Embraers over there, it's a little bit more comfortable. And then you add that hard stand in there. So they understand, and they're operating flights kind of in the morning and then in the evening. And so they have these kind of gaps in the day. Those gaps can get filled. But at the end of the day, currently, the terminal can only handle at most 3 aircraft at a time. And so once those gaps in the schedule start getting filled and you start seeing more and more flights coming, that's when we'll say, okay, we've had your capacity at the terminal, now we need to add some gates.
And that gate expansion in the direction of the existing runway, you said on the order of 6 to 8 for a total of about 10.
Well, just depends. Again, that depends on the size of aircraft and the design. So I won't commit any numbers to how many gates it is. I mean, you go to Sea-Tac, they have 80-something gates, but also 40 hard stands or something. I mean, they have a lot of hard stands, and so it's based off of the fleet mix, right? And so we'll let the demand tell us what we need to build, but we're assuming at least 6 more gates.
Can you handle any upgrade of the aircraft, or is 737 about your limit?
Currently, right now, our ramp is only designed for a Group 3 aircraft, and so Group 3 is a 737, and Group 3 is aircraft are based on different sizes, Group 1 through 5,
The
and it's
Airbus,
based off of
what,
wingspan.
230.
If you get an Airbus 320, 320, actually, I think one of those might move up, but those are Group 3s as well. Yep.
As is the new Max 10.
Yes, yes. Yeah, all the new 37s coming out, they're all compatible with our airfield. Now, with that being said, we can handle anything. Boeing makes the biggest jets in the world here. So, but we'd have to bulldoze and redo some things. And, so we could do anything, but, does it make sense, right? So.
What are the charges if the group is to, we're looking at a potentially a even longer time span than your current planning period. Mm-hmm. In the course of doing this master plan, did you look at, okay, so when this is up, what's next? Is this just, is 6 million and 6 million a year and 10 gates it? Or like what happens next?
Yeah, so for us, the master plan is funded by the FAA and it's a 20-year plan. It's the parameters, like that's what we work in. So we only look at 20 years. One thing I've learned about master plans is they're not really good for 20 years. Mm-hmm. Plans change pretty rapidly, right? I mean, if you in 2000 did a master plan to grow your commercial service, in 2002, that'd be completely different because 9/11, right? So this is a plan based off of what we knew and assumed at 2019 through 2024. And so we don't try to look past that 20 years because we just don't know. We do our best as airport directors to look ahead to make sure the next person sitting in that seat, you're not impacting them negatively and putting something in their way that they have to remove to get their job done. But no, we try to stay within that 20-year and not to speculate any further than that. 20 years is already a push in my opinion.
If you don't wait 20 years, you refresh it.
Yes.
5 to 7 years, or whatever.
Yeah. Probably 10 years in the middle of this or whatever year, we'll realize, oh, this plan is dramatically, different than the reality of what's happening in our world. And then we go back out and we'll likely do another.
And you can be really wrong on those. Sea-Tac was in the 70s. We thought we would hit 30 million or 40 million by 2030. I think we
you did that.
Yeah, we did.
You were right.
But you got to remember that was in the 70s that we were picking those numbers out of the sky.
Yeah. And this isn't just us working in a vacuum to try and figure out this plan. We do take other considerations while this was happening. I know Eric had conversations with the previous group before you on why we chose, the way we chose to do certain things back then. And so we were part of that. I talked to Ann. How often? I talked to Ann enough, just to kind of see what else is happening out there because this is really symbiotic. I talked to Rich over at Moses Lake. I was out there just, 2 weeks ago? So I go visit all these other airports to learn kind of the system and what's happening because if I'm impacted negatively, right, who can help me, right? So we're obviously here. We know that there's demand coming our way. We know that we're going to see some folks that don't want to fly out of our friendly partner from the south. A lot of people right now are driving right past us to go to them still. So we want people to know that we're here. And at the same time, I always want people to know we're not trying to expand. We're not trying to grow. We're not trying to build this and be the next whatever. We're really just responding to the demand of what's coming our direction. And if it's not there, then we won't build for it.
I have more questions.
Yeah, go ahead. I'm here all day.
I apologize. I was not able to read your whole master plan before your presentation, so might be in there. What are you doing from a multimodal perspective? The light rail, as I recall, is being built here, but it's not really being built to the terminal. It's being built to serve commuters to the Boeing plant, which we're not the Sound Transit Board. Subject.
I already know where you're going. I'll talk about
them. But you had there's the Amtrak station in Mukilteo at the bottom of the hill. It's not that far away, or the line at least. Swift, I saw a Swift bus stopping out here as I was making the turn to come over to this meeting today. So what are you doing as far as access to the terminal from multiple?
Yeah, so we do have bus service to the terminal and makes a loop around the terminal currently. We are working with Sound Transit right now to kind of figure out if a train stop ends up here, where does it go? Does Bowen get one? Do we get one? Do we both get one? But even if they do that, because the original Sound Transit plan went straight up I-5, right? Well, commercial service showed up, so that plan is now being reevaluated to cut over to Paine and then go back up towards Everett. They're also looking at maintenance facilities, but even if they did that, that part of the project is still unfunded because it's a new addition. But we are lobbying for them so that we can have connectivity between Sea-Tac and Paine. And so we're pushing hard for that. We have some spots on airport property and on Boeing property that we're all evaluating and looking at, but I would say it's too early to say where it's going to go. But we are working towards that goal to make sure we try to get the train here. And if it is not at the terminal, we'll make sure there's a shuttle that gets folks back and forth. So,
Mr. Chair, I know you've got a bunch more questions, but I just wanted to kind of tag on that. There is a group right now working on designing the future high-speed rail that's envisioned to go down the I-5 corridor from Vancouver, BC to Eugene. And so I've talked to them about how important it will be to link that high-speed rail with airports. And they're a little bit concerned about that because I-5 corridor is their plan. So linking it specifically to Sea-Tac isn't a natural. But it seems like for you, that might be, there might be some opportunities there.
and our county executive, I believe, is on the board of the Sound Transit, so he's tapped into that. It is something we're investigating because we understand we want people to have access to the airport, and there was even pushing ideas for park and ride at the train station if it shows up. So, but we'll see. None of that's been decided. Again, unfunded.
So, and not to get off the subject here, but regarding the high-speed rail route, is WashDOT hung up on following I-5? I mean, there were so many advantages to having that route very close to Sea-Tac, which is done in a lot of European cities. I mean, I'm personally familiar with Frankfurt, having lived over there, that you can get off the airplane there, take an escalator downstairs, and get on a train right there and go to almost anywhere in Europe. That's so important, I think. I mean, even the light rail at Sea-Tac, you have to walk about, a quarter of a mile? It's kind of inconvenient. And some people can't walk that far. So I don't know how far along the design is on the high-speed rail project, but to me, they really need to be thinking about serving Sea-Tac.
Thank you so much for saying that. I 125% agree with you. They're still in the very, very early stages, but right now their vision is to be on the I-5 corridor. So I think it would be awesome if this group could make that be one recommendation to the high-speed rail planners that connecting with Sea-Tac would meet all of our goals.
Part of our work is going to be to figure out how to offload some of that Sea-Tac traffic. So if you could easily get, high-speed rail service in there, I'm thinking about removing flights between Sea-Tac and Portland, for example. If you could get those people on a high-speed rail out of Sea-Tac instead of hopping on another airplane down to Portland, I think there's some air traffic relief there that's possible.
We're in violent agreement. Plus, and I don't want to disparage my my colleagues at WashDOT, but I-5 is broke, and so wouldn't it be awesome to have another way rather than driving your car on that freeway to get through that area as well?
And I would say the same thing by I-90. It's a terrible experience.
I forgot what my next question is.
The one after.
Air cargo. That was what it was. So one of the other, we're not just a passenger work group, we're supposed to look at aviation needs overall, and so that would include aviation employment as well as our cargo. Where does your plan envision, if it envisions any sort of expansion of the cargo operation?
Yeah, I think really we have FedEx up here currently right now. They're not doing any operations really. They're just subleasing their property back to Boeing so they can park airplanes. However, if it were to happen, it would likely happen somewhere over on the west side of the airport. If you've been paying attention, Boeing Field King County International Airport has raised their hand. They want cargo. And so that's something I think when you guys likely visit them, if you haven't already, something that you probably should add to your questions for that group. We do understand there's a lot of cargo in the area. So there's got to be some questions asked on how much Boeing Field cargo they can actually handle. And then if that comes to us or wherever that goes later. But currently right now, we're not seeing a big push. We're not hearing from a lot of cargo providers to try to get to Paine Field. So it's not really a big demand that we have currently in this environment, but if it does show up, it'll be on the side.
I have a question. In your calculations and growth management, trees, everything else, is there a percentage in there for like community outreach? Is that a separate plan that you have? How is that calculated?
Yeah, so, well, for just the plan, the whole plan had community outreach to put this piece together, right? Multiple times through the process, a lot of public comments. And believe it or not, it actually kind of helped us make some decisions in our plan and kind of drive us in some certain directions. We talk about any type of project, but we're going to do anything, move earth, or move a building, or move something. We have to go through environmental. There's public comment during that. There's all kinds of public commenting processes through this. So when we're talking about these things right now, we're just talking about it. But when we actually get ready to take some action, then there's a process we have to follow. And for those different projects, there's commenting periods reserved in those projects as well. Yes, sir.
Do you have a contingency for if the federal funding tap starts to dry up over your planning period for funding what you might otherwise fund with FAA funds?
Well, we hope that never happens.
Right.
I have talked about this, I think, because we get about 90% of our funding for infrastructure anyways, what we would have to do is tighten our belts. User fees would likely go up. We would slow projects, push projects down. However, I think if the demand is there, that's something we can't do. And there will be other relief valves that we'll look to for funding, whether that's from some of our big power players, whether it's from the state of Washington or whoever. But I'm going to knock on every single door if that ever happens.
You talked about the trust fund and how it's already funded by user fees, AIP.
Well, as far as, so I think what he's kind of referring to is the rules changing and how we receive those dollars. So the money's there, and we'll just see if the rules change for us to be able to get it. But if you want to talk about the trust fund today.
And he says raising user fees, so all of the airport improvement programs are already funded through the aviation trust fund through the federal government. So there's sales tax on fuel, every pilot license, every aircraft registration, every time you go fly internationally, there's a customs fee, and all of those are going into the fund that it is going for our federal grants. So I can't say, don't quote me as saying our grants are safe, but they are already funded by the user fees from aviation directly for the majority of the airport grant funds that we receive.
Demand goes down, funds go down. You don't need them.
I'll just add a comment that the Congress really likes to use those monies to help balance the budget.
Yeah, you have to apportion those funds. There's not a guarantee that it will go to aviation.
Yeah. Which is why we always talk to our legislators. Very important piece, right? Because they're gonna help us get to where we need to go. So. Okay. Anyone else? Anyone online? Any questions? Okay. Well, thank you for being at Paine Field. We're glad you guys chose us, and we're happy to host. I'm going to disappear for a few minutes, but I'm going to rejoin here shortly. I have to go take my airfield driver training. So most of us know what that is. And, yeah, so basically I'm going to go sit in front of a computer for 3 hours. But really glad you're here. We hope you enjoy the tour later as well. I'll be leading that. But if you have any questions at all, don't hesitate to reach out to my team, my staff, myself, and Anne.
Will you be driving us on the airplane?
I won't drive, but I'll be talking. Yes.
Yeah, RFQ.
All right. Well, thank you very much. I'll let y'all continue your meeting.
Thank you, Josh.
Thank you.
We're, I think, unless anyone else has anything we want to talk about in the next few minutes, we can break for lunch early. Christina's already put the lunch break schedule, and then we're going about as much as I love to do.
All right, everyone, we will now start the public comment portion of this meeting. We have 30 minutes for public comment, and each person has 2 minutes to speak. If at the end of 2 minutes you go over, we will say your 2 minutes are over and ask that you please wrap up your comment. Please abide by the protocols of the commission meeting in order to help this meeting run smoothly. I will alternate back and forth between in-person and online Zoom public comment. If you would like to comment and you're online, please raise your hand using the hand raise tool in the reaction section of Zoom. For those in person, please form a line in the back, and we'll just go one at a time back and forth. So is there anyone in person that would like to go first? Perfect. Can you come up and...
There's 2 of us in person.
Okay, yeah, come up to the podium and state your name and... Yeah.
Yes, we kind of thought it was going to be 3 minutes, but that's okay.
Okay.
We'll do what we can.
That's fine.
So here's where you would.
Yes, please, and speak loud and clearly so we can run on mic.
Oh, I see. There's the thing, yes. My name is Mary Patterson. I live in the city of Seattle. I've worked with a number of organizations, 350 Seattle, which is a climate justice organization, Solutionary Rail, which is a mode shift to rail organization, and the latter is part of the Rail Can't Wait campaign. Mostly I want to put in a good word for the really essential role that multimodal should play, we think, in your planning. We know that we're going to need aviation. For long distance, it's a very big country, it's a very big continent. For long distance, for across the oceans. But for the shorter distances especially, what role can rail play? What role can rail play? And the advantages of rail in climate, health, and mobility are really important to be considered. Very energy efficient. It uses it's at least 1/3 of the energy that cars and trucks use, perhaps less than that. Very low emissions. It can be electrified without over relying on batteries, which are very resource intensive, we know. So there's a lot of advantages to mode shift to rail for both passengers and freight. And we really hope that that will be taken seriously and folded into your overall planning, particularly for the short distance flights that go in and out of Sea-Tac and the other airports in Washington, particularly for the short distance. There is existing rail line and in some cases already existing rail service that could be used much more much more seriously and invested in by the state with much more seriousness, including east-west service to the central part of the state. We haven't had rail service there since I think 1979, 1970 something anyway. But there's a growing momentum to restore that service. And the last thing I'll say, because I'm sure I'm past the 2 minutes now, is that a bill was just passed in Olympia, 1837, to really ramp up Amtrak Cascade service between Vancouver, BC, Skagit Valley, Everett, Seattle, and points south into Portland and Eugene. And we really are looking forward to, by 2035, a much greater and much more reliable service on that route. So thank you for considering mode shift to rail in your overall plan.
Thank you. Okay, next we will go to someone online. Brett, I'm going to allow you to mute yourself.
Thank you. I see my camera is off as well. Would you like to see me or not?
I don't have the ability to put your camera on, but we can hear you clearly.
Thank you very much. Greetings, Chair Nordby and members. I'm Dr. Breck Lebeg, co-chair of the Climate and Health Task Force of Washington Physicians for Social Responsibility. As a retired Air Force flight surgeon for 30 years, I love flying. I have thousands of hours of military flight time, and I'm also trained to recognize some harms of some aviation activity. PSR formed last century nationally to oppose nuclear weapons as a threat to life on the planet, continues that work, and now commits to prevent and mitigate climate change as a clear and present threat to human health, especially disease caused by directly burning fossil fuel. As you know, the transportation sector remains the large source of carbon emissions in Washington. There's an old saying, if we keep doing what we've done, we just get more of what we got. So transport policy has clear consequences to human health. Overwater flights are necessary. Short hops are the worst, contributing significant climate harm and releasing microscopic PM2.5 particles that go deep in the lungs, enter the bloodstream, cause heart and lung disease, even dementia, and premature deaths. So what? Sea-Tac residents living under the flight path have been demonstrated to have somewhere between 2 and 5 year shorter lifespan, largely because of these particles and diseases. Climate science and Washington law requires all of us to reduce greenhouse gases. Reducing flight numbers and not expanding airports are the best solution. So WPSR strongly advocates expanding the north, south, and east-west passenger and freight rail system, as you've just heard, with fast, frequent, reliable, affordable intercity trains, produce much less pollution than flying short hops. We strongly support electrification when that can be done. And shifting from fossil fuels to electric power, of course, will require more electric clean energy production. So we ask, in the end, will you advise that we keep doing what we're doing or choose healthier transport modes? WPSR stands ready to advise you of the health consequences of transport policy and practice as you carry out your work. Thank you for that privilege, and thanks for speaking with you today.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, next up in person.
Tom White, Climate Rail Alliance. I'm part of that Rail Can't Wait group, and Climate Rail that pretty much tells you what we're about. Everything you know about what American Rail does, forget it, because American Rail doesn't do what rail service can do. So we need to be innovative, Japan, Europe, things like that. When it comes to climate, some of those benefits have been explained for expanding air service. However, having been the railroad equivalent of air traffic controller for 2 decades, I really sympathize with those guys that are doing that. And one day, I don't know, it must have been last year, there was a runway incursion at BDX. I could figure out why, listening to the radio. The why I couldn't figure out is, why is FedEx flying a plane from Portland to Seattle? Okay. The service we have for Amtrak Cascades is already faster city to city than flying, including metal detector, all that stuff like that. It's faster than flying. We have a plan that's been mentioned for 2 hours and 30 minutes between Seattle and Portland, hands down faster than flying. When we designed that plan, we actually diverted the BN track under Bellingham Airport. And it's got a 6,700-ish foot runway and Cat 2 landing. It's not being used. We could run trains directly to it with a station that looks like Schiphol in the basement. We need those things. We need, the whole Sound Transit thing with, is the station going to be I-5 or Boeing or here? Trains can stop at more than one station. You need a station here and a station for the community. So just think what trains can do, not what they do, and you'll be going down the right path.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. I don't see anyone else online with their hand raised. Is there anyone else in person that has public comment? I'll give one more moment. Anyone online? Okay, seeing none, this concludes the public comment portion. Thank you everyone who participated. You can always submit public comment on the website under the contact tab as well. So back to you, Evan.
All right, well, I think we can continue with our work part of the work group. Right, we're not obligated to like wait until the end of the designated public comment session.
Would you like the ability to share your screen by chance?
No, these are my notes.
Okay. I don't know if you wanted to do it.
So we had on here as our next agenda item was continue the RFP discussion if we hadn't concluded that before Mr. Marcy's presentation. But we did conclude that, unless there's anything else anyone wants to talk about. As far as next steps, there's actually a few things. We have a statutory requirement to submit even though we just submitted, it feels like a report at the end of 2024.
I don't understand.
Can't say it any more clear than that, Siri. We have a statutory requirement to submit a report by July 1st, even though we just submitted one at the end of the year.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
I apologize. The most recent legislation changed that to December 1st, so we've got a couple of months.
Hey. So the most recent as in just passed and was part of the budget?
Like a couple weeks ago.
Okay, great.
Did the governor sign that?
Yes.
Okay. So that means we have quite a bit of time. So we have to even submit it
some time
to WashDOT to then be processed.
Yes.
Okay. So that would put you said it's December 1st. So that probably means like October 31 for a draft adopted by us to WashDOT to go through the process.
Correct. So continue.
Okay. Well, my first question was, is it possible to get an extension? So, okay, having achieved that.
All you have to do is ask.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think we should. Everyone just needs to collectively remember that when we have a meeting sometime in mid-fall, one of the agenda items has to be draft the report, and then have another meeting ahead of October 31 to then adopt the report, much like we did last fall. We had a special meeting for that. Rhea had asked a question at the last meeting about the HEAL Act, and we had some discussion around that, and I volunteered to pull the text and take a look through it. And it established a new section in the RCW. It's chapter 70A.02, titled Environmental Justice. And it's a set of substantive and procedural commitments for covered agencies, quote unquote, to adhere to when they're planning with regard to environmental justice. Agencies that are not covered agencies can opt in. And then even if they opt in, it's essentially there are some requirements that still don't apply if you choose to opt in. We are not a covered agency. Even if we opted in, we're still not a state agency. So, but we could decide to do that as a group. And so what I'm going to suggest is that everyone read 78.02 for what we would be opting into as far as, and a lot of it is just sort of best practices for community outreach, I'd say, and planning for mitigation of environmental impacts of any sort of state agency decision. We didn't draft specific language to add to the charter ahead of this meeting because it's such a, I think everyone in the group really should read chapter 78.02 of the revised code of Washington for what's in there. And the other, one of the pieces of it is trying to mitigate environmental harms to what are currently overburdened communities. And there is a map that the State Department of Health has put together of overburdened communities. It's probably not a surprise that the environmentally overburdened communities are the ones more or less along I-5 and happen to surround our existing airports. And when I read the statute, I think the best reading of it is it's meant to ensure consultation and mitigation and outreach as opposed to drive and sprawl, because I think maybe a bad faith interpretation of the statute would be, we need to put dirty things out where nobody lives. Exactly, yeah. So I hope I think that's exactly the point, is to drive consultation, mitigation, and outreach. And so we should read that before so that everybody knows what we're looking into. But I think it is a pretty thoughtful list of what state agencies should do in decision.
I appreciate the research because I think my original thought was more the track of the HEAL Act agencies included the Department of Transportation. And what I'm hearing is that we are independent of that, even though they support and staff us. In the interest of full disclosure, I'm founding co-chair for the Environmental Justice Council, which is authorized under the HEAL Act. And the Environmental Justice Council is also required under law to guide expenditures of the cap and invest money, which I believe might play a very important role in the work that we do. So I'm no longer chair. I'm still on the executive committee. I finished my 2-year term in February. I'm thinking if the group wants, I can ask them to do a presentation on the components of the law, if that would be helpful.
Yeah, I think that'd be great.
You did a great summary.
Yeah. Read it, but also having it presented and explained.
Sure. Could you repeat again the RCW code that you're suggesting?
Yeah, it's chapter 70 and then capital A.02.
I remember we had some discussion on this last time that because we're advisory, we take what we advise to those groups that are already under the HEAL Act.
Right.
That's their job to apply our information to the HEAL Act.
Right. And so then I think that one of the ideas would be if we are ourselves sort of in our information gathering and advice role, understand what's in that statute, that we do a better job of doing our job.
So skips an iteration of, oh, what about?
Yeah.
Oh, we don't want to give them anything they can't do anyway. That'd be frustrating and a waste of money.
So, does anyone else want to, any questions or want to speak to that?
Not to that, I've got another next steps comment if you're ready for that.
Sure.
When we do our annual report, one of the things we have to have in there is some kind of way of addressing what we're thinking of doing moving forward with JBLM. And it doesn't specifically say, I don't believe, in the legislation, but it kind of leads me to believe that they're looking for an affirmative statement that we're going to give up the idea of making JBLM a joint use facility. So I want to just.
Why would we do that?
That's up to this group to decide, but I just want to put a marker out there that that's something we need to address to have it included one way or another in our annual report. I have spoken with the leadership at JBLM about addressing this group, and my interpretation is that they've got political concerns about doing that. So I don't know, maybe Mr. Chair, if it comes from you, if an invitation came from you or something. So that's one thing. Another thing is, in the conversation that we've had today, we've talked a lot about multimodal opportunities and just heard a lot of rail advocates. And so I think if we got to the point where we said, okay, this group is looking at recommendations of what we can do in the future, but those recommendations won't include, hypothetically, if it's one of them, to have commercial service at JBLM or to build a new airport in the Puget Sound region. I think those are incremental steps that we may be able to take that would change the tone of this whole group and kind of set the stage that what we're looking to do is, as a community, solve this issue, not ramrod some kind of solution down people's throats that don't want it. That makes sense.
Yeah,
exactly. Yeah.
I think that's a good idea. I don't know how to summarize that into a motion, or what do we do with that?
I think you were just asking if the letter were to come from the chair, we might hear a little bit more, or might be able to give the leadership at JBLM the option to respond. So, an accurate way of saying that?
That sounds good. Yeah.
To respond in writing or respond to presentation. Please don't try to pick us presentation, perhaps. I mean, if that's what they're.
I'd offer, for my limited window with JBLM, I'm on the wrong side of the mountains, but we do see them almost every day. I think it's been loud and clear that for them to pivot to civilian commercial activity would be unattractive to air mobility. But I think, because you're right, I think it would just be, if they just showed up, it would be why you shouldn't pick us. However, I think what would be very useful for us is, because we're supposed to be looking at transportation across the state, they are also users of the airspace, and in very specific places across the state, on both sides of the mountain. I think perhaps if we invited them to come and allow them to kind of tell us what they need, because they're still going to be here, and we still need to figure out what we're going to do about transportation, and we can at least try not to hurt each other. Yes, maybe, So maybe there's a way to ask them where they could present something positive to us, and not just a negative presentation.
Yeah, I mean, I even think last fall we were talking about, at a minimum, trying to get that piece of it, the airspace piece of it, presented to us, and they never showed up. So never scheduled it. So, but that might be
2 hands over here. I'll stop by.
Yeah, Maria, you hear that?
Oh, I'm sitting here trying to think, should I share this information with them or not? But I thought, I have to be responsible. As much as I like the idea, let's just be aware that the question of how many flights come in and out of JBLM will come up, because that area, Tacoma is identified as one of the 19 identified, and I'm forgetting the technical term at the state level, that's highly polluted. So just be aware of what it ignites.
I was just going to mention that as far as JDLM, I'm just of the opinion that trying to convince the Department of Defense that JBLM should be a joint use airfield is a waste of our time. That's just my opinion. As far as JBLM's use of airspace around the state, that's pretty well spelled out in the military training routes that are well documented. So we know where they do their training operations. So I'm not sure we need a presentation on that. We just need to be aware of that when we start thinking about expanding airports, if you will, that we don't impose any burden on their use of the airspace, which is pretty well defined. Now, if they want to come and talk to us, I think that's fine too. But I'm just saying that that's pretty well documented.
So do we want to present something? I mean, the rest, more than a few in this room don't know what MTRs are. I want to take that on to share, to explain it to them.
I guess we could. Someone else who's pretty well versed in that is Robert Hodgman, who we just invited, who I think is going to be a non-voting member. He could talk to that too. So that's something, Rich, that we could maybe defer for right now until maybe next meeting.
I'm going to help.
To that, I think we could get somebody from the FAA region to come and talk about airspace too.
Yeah.
I know a guy.
I know a guy too.
So do I. Lots of them.
You know what's comfortable for me about inviting an FAA person first, then the JBLM person, is that it gives us a larger.
Yes. Yeah.
So that would be very helpful.
Yeah.
I think FAA is going to give you an airspace presentation that's beyond JBLM. It's going to be about the complexity of the air traffic airspace in the whole Puget Sound region in general. I mean, there's all kinds of little ins and outs. I think you've got Tacoma Industrial there, then you've got JBLM actually. Then you've got the Army Airport right next door to McCord. The rest there, right at Gray Field. And let's see, who am I missing? Then you've got the underlying that, you've got it's a little general aviation airport there. It's
Coleman Narrows Airport and BLU.
Yeah, the other one that I'm thinking of is on the west side of or the east side of JBLM General Aviation Airport. At any rate, and then you've got Boyne Field, and so that whole airspace thing is a pretty complex subject. And I just think that if I sit here and I try to envision JBLM being a joint use airfield, it's just going to be a mess. I don't think the FAA is going to like it.
I can tell you that the people that do airspace planning at FAA are willing to talk to us.
Yeah.
Yeah. So while we're talking about that, I would like to invite somebody from FAA also to talk about slot restrictions, which doesn't really exist too much on the West Coast, but I would like this group to hear about that because that's the way that FAA would deal with congestion at Sea-Tac if it gets to the point where FAA thinks they need to step in. So to me, that's kind of the do nothing scenario. If we don't do anything, ultimately we'll get to slot. So I would like us to understand how that works.
Would that be the same person or same set of people presenting on those two subjects?
No, they're completely unrelated, but we could make it. We can have FAA Day.
He tells me that is.
We don't have to have it at the same meeting.
Right.
Separate subjects.
Yes.
Has his hand raised? Go ahead.
Yeah, we keep talking about all these airspace requirements, and I know that they are completely right now proposing revamping the entire ATC infrastructure across the country. I know they've been talking about this since I've been in college, and that was 20 years ago. But it seems like this is really becoming a realistic thing that could happen. And to eliminate things based on airspace with the current technology may not be a very smart long-term decision, because by the time this issue comes to be in Sea-Tac, we could have a completely different air traffic system that's more efficient, that works better, and can handle more aircraft, or maybe not handle more, but be more efficient. There's joint use airports all across the country, and I just don't feel it should be eliminated right off the bat. That's just my piece.
Okay, I tend to agree with you. I think the speaks to the kind of the importance of hearing from FAA on issues that we talked about, plus the potential for ATC modernization, so that we can actually, and working through the RFQ, so we can have some more informed guidance before we make hard recommendations.
I think the other thing to take into account, though, is even if we could wave a magic wand tomorrow and have more capacity in airspace, it doesn't resolve this constraint on the land side. We call it the SCA, right? We're so constrained.
Right.
So it's not going to add more capacity.
So getting back to the specific language that says we need to address the JVLM question, to let the legislature ask us to answer that question fairly early on. It sounds like we need to invite them and then let them tell us what they're going to tell us, one way or the other, so then we can pass that along to the legislature.
I think we talked about having a possible meeting there as well. I mean, instead of having them come to us, we go to them. So.
Yeah. So is that the letter? I can sign the letter. As far as drafting the letter,
we can work together on that.
Okay.
Just a clarification. So the intent is, and I'm just referring to this paragraph. So the intent is for them to speak about the compatibility of military and
or lack thereof.
Yeah. I didn't want to say incompatibility.
Yeah.
It sounds negative. Okay, got it. Thank you.
Yeah. And then similarly, to reach out to the FAA, do you think that needs to be a formal letter, or do we think that needs to be a request?
I can do that.
Okay. And with that,
Just have to ask them.
Why don't we ask JBLM to invite us there for our meeting?
That's what we're saying. I think they offered. Someone said something.
They have a presentation. I don't think they offered to have us there, but that would show really good faith.
Yeah, the only concern is getting everybody on the installation, and that's there are a bunch of issues related to that, and it can be done, but also for the challenge to be available to the public. Yeah,
you better do it off days.
Mr. Chair, it seems like I've been to a public meeting there. Like, is there a golf course nearby? Or
Yes.
Yeah.
So
So I think there's a place where they do that.
Yeah, that's off the installation, but
Right.
nearby.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
We're still on next steps, right?
We're still on next steps, yes, because we've actually merged into the next topic for us, which was planning the next set of meetings.
Well, before we do that,
yeah,
we definitely have a couple of things we should talk about.
Yeah.
One I'm going to keep reiterating is in 2 months, in theory, you are no longer chair because you're not a voting person.
Right.
So again, I want to make sure that one of I'm hoping that the next steps our action items are being tracked somewhere. I know we talked about a few during this meeting, but I don't know if they're being captured. But one would be about, again, making sure we can get those terms solidified, because again, the rest of the work pales if we're inviting people from the FAA and other places to meetings where we can't vote or we're not technically on the work group anymore because of that. So again, making sure that we have those loose ends tied up within the next couple of months, because again, term limits are right around the corner. Then two, again, I brought up the idea of having some type of subcommittee to manage this process with the RFQ and answering any subsequent questions around that, so that when we do meet again, that we have something more foundational around it instead of discussing it again and get it the same way.
Who was on the RFQ draft subcommittee?
Yeah.
You all want to continue as the sort of RFQ process management subcommittee? You try to come up with even longer name.
I think that's fine. I guess I thought we had kind of resolved what was going to be in the RFQ.
But then who follows up? Like, what happens after that?
Because we're going to get their.
She sends it out.
Yeah, it'll be the WashDOT contracting office that sends it out.
Yeah.
But then it'll have to be this group that makes the selection.
Sure.
So if you want to have a subcommittee to do the interviews or review the submittals, whatever.
That's what I heard you suggesting.
Yes.
Yeah.
I don't want that to happen and we pause again and okay, now what do we do? Let's get that lined up now so we can keep the ball rolling.
So just to recap, Anne is going to include that paragraph from page 38 that we talked about this morning. And she's going to issue the RFQ. Then when we get offers or questions, there's going to be a period there where we're going to get questions from potential responders, which we will answer back and forth. We could do that as a subcommittee, or we could do that as a full committee. Once we get past that Q&A portion, then these offers come in, then the work group as a whole, I think, would want to make that selection. We could have a recommendation from, if we have an RFQ subcommittee that can make a recommendation to the group as a whole, but I think the group as a whole that should approve it. That's kind of my take on how this would flow.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Would it work to have them come in, a few of the candidates, to meet the entire?
So with that in mind, I would offer to continue on the RFQ subgroup. Ellie,
Yeah.
who else is on?
I can help because I've done selection processes for consultants before.
I have a question about who answers their questions though, because there could be quite a difference in opinion around this table on what the answer of any particular question they might have.
I think we could bring those to the full.
Yeah, okay, yeah, just so that.
And now maybe that's something we could do via email.
Yeah,
It
exactly.
goes back to our question about, can we do things like this without bypassing the Public Records Act? It's a
less
lucky business.
We have to make sure the RFQ subcommittee is less than a quorum of the full group. And with only 7 voting members right now, that means we can have no more than 3 people on the RFQ subcommittee. And to be able to have a discussion by email, it doesn't constitute public meeting.
It does,
So-
it does not.
That does not, right. So then otherwise, if you had want to bring things to the full group, then 3 people that could discuss them amongst themselves and then say, here's what we're going to present for the full group at the next meeting.
Yeah, I also know a process that we use at the EJ Council. So even in the discussion groups, we call it workshopping.
Yeah.
And say there's 3 different dates so that we make sure that the numbers don't see what would look like for them. And clarification, that discussion, I'm assuming includes non-voting members? That's a question.
I mean, I think the overall discussion should include all the full membership, right? But as far as
The final voting on adoption.
yeah, thinking the voting and then also the determination of the public meetings and quorum voting members only.
But by the time that comes around, unless the state does something, there'll only be 5 of you.
Right.
Exactly.
Of the 19.
I'll see the governor once they for breakfast and I'll nudge for us.
Was there a letter we were supposed to write when Rep. Phi and Rep. Dent were here? Was there something we were supposed to submit forward?
Yeah, we talked about that earlier as an action item.
Oh, sorry.
No, it's good.
And when will we be sending that? I'm just thinking of their vacations and.
But also, whose action was it to take? That's what I'm trying to get us to.
Thank you. I'm just gonna recommend it, Pam, to help us put together that letter.
Which letter? Which of the several letters?
This is nudging the The appointment.
Oh, yeah.
I wrote a letter to the governor already, so, and nobody asked me to.
Yeah, but I think it's more from the formal CAWG.
He's already talked to the staff. She's talked to him. What more can we, and our representative has just told us online that he's talked to him.
And I'm having a meeting next week. If anyone's willing to do it.
Woohoo.
If the 5 members that are still on want to sign a letter, I think that's great. By the time they read it, hopefully they'll have already made a decision.
What was the action for the last meeting? Sorry, Christine, I think we actually gave it to you.
I don't have those notes with me, but I think that they were asking, well, this is my memory, but I think that they were asking for input on what to put in legislation in the session that just ended. So they've done that because they were asking for from the airports and a lot of different people for that kind of input. But then I think they also said for a letter to the governor, but as the chair said, I think we're working through that. So I think those issues on the appointments. And just to be clear, my conversation with the governor's office, the feedback that I got was, this is all silly. Everybody who's appointed, like basically your expiration dates don't matter. You're on the committee, you're doing the work. So.
But.
Yeah. Yeah.
We were challenged we were challenged by the public about who voted.
Yeah.
And very early on. So whether the governor's office thinks it doesn't matter or not,
the
public thinks it matters.
I agree. And I responded to them that way. Yeah.
And when does the term start? Is it when we have our full committee, or
no, on your letter when you were appointed?
So it's each person's appointment.
Yes.
Yeah. So it's a rolling, so we don't all expire off at the same time. There's somewhere like.
But if some of us were appointed a month before we even had a meeting.
I know.
For 2 months, right? Yeah.
Right.
I'm just saying, if I was an outside corporate entity, I wouldn't take us seriously. If someone was coming to me asking me to do work, and those that are asking for it are not within terms of something like that.
I'd like to share the experience of the EJ Council, wherein we could not vote until we were fully seated. So for 1 year, the way we did business is we learned, we planned, and we banked what appears to be joint consensus agreements. And then when it was time for us to be all, when we were seated, then we just went to that bank. Because our work is cumulative, imagining that we would make it easy.
I think this will get resolved. So
I just want to make sure that someone's watching it. They're not necessarily assuming somebody else is watching it.
I have been. I've just not been seeing everybody on my email.
No, it's good to know. I'm just.
So.
And one last thing, and this goes into the scheduling the 2025 meetings. Thank you to everyone who did fill out the form that I sent out about that. And what I can tell you is majority of you did it, 13, so yay. The majority suggested that after this meeting, our meeting frequency would be every 2 months, alternating between hybrid and virtual. So with this one being hybrid, the next one would be virtual, and we're looking at July, if that is still the majority consensus, unless something has changed. So you take that information and do with it like you.
And then our next one is in September, right?
In
Our
theory,
draft
yes.
is due in October, and then the final in December.
Unless the committee decides to change it again, but right now it's the majority vote was every 2 months alternating.
I think I voted for that option, so I think it's a good option. But some of what we're doing, like presentations, like obviously a tour, really lends itself to the good weather of the summer and who is willing to do things when. So I feel like we shouldn't necessarily, glue ourselves to hybrid virtual every other. And if we said, if the FAA says, yeah, we can do our presentation virtually, then that lends itself to a virtual meeting. But if one of the airports, because I think we had suggestions of meeting locations. And
yep, that's the next part.
Yeah.
But I would also say too but conversely, I would say probably people are traveling and vacationing in July. And so they would probably be more likely to do a virtual than an in-person because they would be.
Living east of the mountains, about November, December, January, February, about those months, pretty tough to get over here.
Yes.
Depending on the weather. So, I'm kind of with Mr. Chair here that it's better to kind of leave that open.
But if it's hybrid, you can join virtually. Is it the challenge is more of finding a location?
That has a location.
Yeah, because I mean, if you can't come, you can always hybrid. You always have the job.
They could all be hybrid as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah.
But just to alternate between virtual and in person is maybe not such a good idea.
Yeah, but you're talking about
make them all
in
hybrid
person
if you want to.
The other, the part B to that, the part B to that is that if we stuck to that, then the one that we would do in September, the majority voted on Eastern Washington. So in theory, the next hybrid / in person could be in September on your side of the mountain.
Yeah, that's okay.
So again, take that information.
Yeah, I just really want to support total hybrid for all meetings because of accessibility for the public as well as ourselves.
Yeah, no, I think that makes a ton of sense. Just like we have, Buck participating today and others and people joining us, the ability to join us online. Probably complicates things for Christina as far as finding places that have stable and fast internet.
Yes.
But if we can pick dates further in advance.
In advance, yes.
Advance is good.
Yeah. Then at least gives you a running start on it.
I would propose let's lock down a date for July right now, and then we can. I will volunteer to send out another one with actual dates for the rest of the year, and coordinate with Christina on that. But since we're all here now, and July's around the corner, I think we might be in a better position right now to say whether or not all virtual in July makes sense or not.
Yeah, you got my calendar.
Yeah, have a sense. Is there like a rhythm we can do? Like today's like a Thursday on the 4th or the 3rd. Will we be able to pick up a rhythm?
Nope. Mainly because I didn't ask per se, because they have jumped between Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays. But I also feel like some of you have kind of very solid, strict schedules that need to be adhered to. So.
I would say definitely not Mondays, because I definitely set up a day before.
Yeah. I would say no Mondays and no Fridays in my own personal opinion, but.
Yeah, me too. Actually, it's about the same time here.
Thursdays are good, but like I've got a meeting in
Looking for a date
Eastern
in July.
Yes.
Well, let's see. It's today, the 26th. How about the 24th?
24th of July.
Yeah.
Day before my birthday.
That's the San Diego Advisory Committee meeting if you're going to be there.
Japan.
You're in Japan. I'm in San Diego.
How about the 17th?
You don't need to sleep that night. You can do hybrid.
How does Thursday, July 17th look for virtual?
Yeah, that would be a hybrid.
No, that'd be virtual.
Everything is right.
Well, no, hybrid means that there's an actual physical location too. We're just trying to do virtual. Yeah.
What day was that again? July?
It's Thursday, July 17th.
That's good. Yeah.
Yep.
That's great.
I'll be in a conference in Spokane on the 15th through the 17th, but the 24th works better for me.
Budget reviews that day.
24th is better for me too. The electrification.
I have BJ Council on the 24th, so I'll pass.
The 17th is okay if it's totally virtual.
It's totally, the July meeting will be totally virtual.
That's fine.
What about the 10th? Is that too early?
Generosity, but you're good. I think the 10th works for me. That works for me. That works for me. Works for me.
10.
We have our regional technical advisory committee. It's our monthly operational meeting during the middle of the day.
I think it's going to be hard to get everyone's schedule.
On the same day.
Just find a day and pick it, and you show up. You show up.
The fewest conflicts have been mentioned so far for the 10th. By my informal count.
The 10th is bad for my whole entire office,
That's
which is those guys. And
that's important.
Shall we just default to the 17th? See what happens.
Does anyone want to move for a vote? People can vote for or against, and even if they may vote for that date, even if it means they're not going to be. So, is there a motion to vote to set the 17th or the 24th?
I'll make a motion to vote for the 17th.
Okay, second. All in favor of the 17th? Okay, we try a voice vote first. In favor of the 17th, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, 17th carries.
Is that one hybrid?
Thursday, July 17th. Virtual.
Oh, virtual.
Virtual only.
Virtual only.
And what we'll, I think what we should do is invite, my suggestion is we invite a presentation from somebody like the FAA who'd be probably equally happy to do virtual versus in person. It's going to be a slide deck on Zoom. So
Also on the field.
yeah, and right. Sure. I mean, how long do you think the council would want to present on that?
We've done one for the legislature, like 20 minutes, and Q&A.
Yeah.
So I'll post the TV. We'll go.
Yeah. Okay. All right, July 17th.
10 o'clock?
10 o'clock? And Ray is going to approach the Environmental Justice Council, which is discussed in the statutory section I mentioned to you all earlier. And you want to talk to the FAA?
Mm-hmm.
Now, beyond July, actually, you wanted to send a survey for dates?
Yep.
For beyond July?
Yep. Mr. Chair, if I could be excused on that day from 10 to 11:30 for the
sorry?
For the 17th, if I could be excused from the 10 to 11:30, so I'll be
sure. Okay, September. So then the annual report, we'll have to spend some time on our September calendar, essentially deciding what's going to go into the annual report. And what I suggest maybe we do is in September, we'll set, like we did last year, a extremely brief virtual only meeting in October to simply adopt the annual report draft. We can adopt it ahead of the deadline to wash down these. And hopefully, how in the RFQ is there? I don't recall from the draft. Is there like is it set a deadline date or is it set a period of time? Like certain number of days or weeks from when it's posted to get responses?
It's usually a set date, and so, what I was thinking is I would just work with the RFQ committee on that because, I can't say at this point what all those dates will be.
Okay.
Because that's not my team, it's the WashDOT contracting team, and so who knows?
Okay. Speculating whether or not we would have anything to discuss in July from that. You know, if 2 months is enough time for people to get submissions turned around and sent back to us.
No.
So probably September is going to be.
Yeah.
September would be hybrid.
Following the pattern, September would be hybrid, so we'd be thinking Eastern Washington location.
Okay, would you like me to coordinate something like we're doing here today at Paine for Yakima's Airport?
I think that makes a ton of sense. I mean, you know, we know that Yakima continues to express interest. They expressed interest late in the last process and were shut out of it because of the requirements imposed on the CAWG. Yeah.
All right, I'll coordinate with Yakima and see what we can set up for sometime in September. So we might leave that date open until I can coordinate with them a little bit.
That would be the point. Since if we're relying on the kindness of others to host us, we should figure out what their availability is instead of saying this is the date.
I'm a little confused. I thought we were doing every other event, and I heard September in Yakima, October for the short meeting to adopt the report.
Just because October 31st is the internal WashDOT deadline for us to give them our adopted annual report that has to be submitted to the legislature by December 1st. So we have to adopt it. Remember
that I understand.
Yeah.
It was just there was a dissonance between every other month.
Yeah. So that would be an out of order. So our next regular meeting would be November. And that would be
replaces it.
We could decide it replaces November, or we could still have a real meeting in November to do real business, and have the October meeting simply be like we did last year, where it was a half an hour on and off the record, where all we did was annual report. And I think that's what I would suggest. But is your survey, you envision the survey being all the way to the end of the year, so it would include November dates too?
Yep.
And we take December off. Familiar with the public agency that routinely uses an 11-month calendar for calendaring things to take multiple years because they treat November and December as 1 month. That's all the holidays. That was savvy of them. Okay. Gary, you had suggested that we ask the past chair of the CAWG to sort of present and answer some questions about that process at one of our meetings, Mr. Hendrickson?
Yeah, there's two people that are kind of familiar with the CAWG's work. That's Warren Hendrickson, and the other one is Rob Hodgman. Now we are going to invite Rob Hodgman to be a non-voting member. So now Warren Hendrickson is a member of the Washington State Aviation Alliance. So, Christina, if we're going to ask, the Alliance may actually nominate Warren Hendrickson. I'm not sure. It would be logical, but So we could do a couple of things. One, we could just wait and ask Rob Hodgman to give us a briefing on what they've done. And he might want to maybe ask Warren Hendrickson to make a presentation along with him, something like that. If that sounds reasonable. Excuse me. We could do that in September. We're going to be at Yakima. Rob Hodgman is the airport director there, so he could do that to get us up to speed a little bit. Excuse me, and then we could ask Warren, ask Rob Hodgman if he thinks we should also invite Warren. So it's however you want to proceed.
Yeah, wherever we. Yeah. No, I Does anyone have thoughts one way or the other? We can see Mr. Hodge.
I'm sure
Hodgman. Mr.
Yeah,
Hodgman.
I'm sure Rob Hodgman would spend as much time as we want on what the CAWG did and what their difficulties were and why they ended up making no recommendation. I mean, it's a matter of probably how much time you want to give it.
Yeah. Because we also want to leave time for them to talk about where they see Yakima playing a role.
Yeah. So there's two different subjects there, really.
Yeah.
Chair,
Yeah.
Rob looks like he is on the Zoom if you wanted me to unmute him to ask if you wanted me to.
Is he on the call?
Yes.
Oh yeah, let's let him speak for himself now. Call out.
Sure.
Okay. Rob, I'm going to unmute you if you're still here.
Yeah, you might have.
If he chimes in, he has the ability to.
Everyone's nightmare to get you step out of the room.
Yeah, I know.
And get called on.
So
Yeah.
he might have said that.
Maybe we should just have that, since that's 2 meetings out. We have time to have that discussion and then decide in July exactly what we want to do in September. Were there any other in survey results? Are there any other trends or
Those are the two that's pertinent for right now.
Okay. Cool. Well, thank you for running that survey, and I'm glad that we all responded this time, unlike the first time. Okay. Well, we are at the end of the agenda, and we're also at the end of my notes, other than the subject of a location for November. But November would be at all online anyway. So the location you need the internet. Okay. Well, does anyone else have anything to bring up before we adjourn for a break? I see. Are you raising your hand or are you just? Okay.
I'm both.
Okay.
Since we have a little bit of extra time on the agenda, first off, I want to remind everybody that I'm here as a non-voting member. As the director of the aviation division, I am not a leader or in any way in charge of the work that this group does. So having said that, I just wanted to take an opportunity to share with the group some of the thoughts that I've been having about where we're going. And I'm guessing that everybody else has been having thoughts too. So if we've got some extra time, maybe we could all share a little bit. Kind of what's been going through my head with the work that the CAC did, they did a site selection process, which we heard loud and clear that nobody said, please build a new airport in my backyard. But since then, we've heard a couple of, well, right.
Yeah.
Well, and thank you, Arv, because that's exactly what I was going to say. Yakima has said, pick me, pick me. At our last meeting, there was a representative, I may get this wrong, but I believe she was from the Burien City Council. And she said that what she hears from her constituents is, on the one hand, they don't like the noise and everything associated with the airport there. On the other hand, there are people, members of the business community, that appreciate the economic activity that helps as the result of the airport. So communities have, from the community, different feelings about the airport. So I'm thinking when we get to the point of making recommendations, it might be interesting to make a recommendation that instead of this group picking what's going to happen where, we seek proposals from communities where they have already reached out to airlines and found airlines that are interested in providing service and interested in building their transportation infrastructure, whatever mode that might be, so that we give communities the opportunity to plan for and resolve the issues at the community level, rather than the state reaching out and saying, we picked you, you will do this. So just a concept I wanted to throw out there.
Well, and that goes exactly, I think I said it earlier today, and I think I said it once before, that I feel, for what we charge with, that we should be going to the communities and asking what their needs are. Our job, according to what it says, is determine the needs of the state in aviation, commercial aviation. Unless I read that wrong, that's what it says. And it spells it out very clearly. Now, how do you determine the needs if you don't talk to the people that need it? All right? We're sitting here and saying, well, it would really be good if it went there. They might not need it. They might not want it. It might not be even good there if we put it there. And so, again, with exactly what you said, I think the needs of where we're looking at, that's why I always thought we should go to all these different communities and ask them what their needs. What is it you would like to see in commercial aviation? I thought that was what our charge was, not for us to sit here and dictate what people were going to do. We found out that didn't work.
Right.
All right?
Right. No, and I agree with both. Yeah, I've been thinking similarly. I'm very excited that Paine Field was willing to host us today and take us on a tour, because they just adopted a new master plan that Alicia was involved in. The master plan envisions growth and plans for it. They have done the community outreach work in this community, and I sort of expected the presentation something like, "Here's the planning we've done, and we have no way to pay for it." And I was actually pretty surprised to hear Mr. Marcy say, "Actually, we think we can pay for all this, and here's how we're going to do it." And to have, of the anticipated, recognizing that there are some people who disagree with the long-term planning numbers for passenger growth in the area. Stipulate there's some disagreement on that. That they're already planning to absorb up to 6 million passengers a year of that gap is extremely helpful to this group's mission. And my question, well, have you thought about what happens after 6 million? Because we're being charged with kind of a longer time span to plan for than their planning cycle. And if you multiply the planning going on here, work here with Bellingham and their master plan, Yakima, and then the rail folks, the solution starts to look like you have a network that's connected on the ground. And if I live in Mount Vernon, I might equally choose, depending on where I'm flying, a train trip to Bellingham, Everett, or Seattle, connecting to the flight. Actually, I have a question for Ben. You know, totally springing this on you. The first meeting,
I'm used to it.
Once upon a time, Alaska was partners with Amtrak Cascades, and they are no longer. But there are examples around the world of airlines placing codes on trains and cross-selling, like Deutsche Bahn and Lufthansa
and buses.
Yeah, that's true. And so tell me, maybe you're already thinking about it. But have Alaska or any other airlines thought about cross-selling with Amtrak Cascades in this market to actually, I could buy a through ticket on Alaska's website from Mount Vernon Amtrak station to Puerto Vallarta?
It's an interesting question. So I can't speak to what other airlines have considered in the U.S. I know that construct exists, both actually today with buses, in some cases post-security with American and United in some of their hubs, as well as internationally Lufthansa and Deutsche Bahn. In the case of major network legacy airlines like Alaska, where our hubs are really dependent on competitive flow markets, say, for example, connecting Spokane over Seattle to LA. In the case of like Portland, Seattle, for example, our nonstop flights are only about 20% of those passengers, maybe less, are traveling to and from the cities. So it's important to consider that we are competing not just with drive markets, but also other airlines, hubs that are able to connect. I think the infrastructure as it sits today with multimodal transportation, candidly would make airlines in Seattle, not just Alaska, but anyone less competitive, because those connections, say over San Francisco, over Salt Lake, Denver, what have you, it doesn't really work. If you're adding, call it 2, 3, 4 hours, however long the additional connection time would be. So that it's just something to consider. Not to say that it's not a viable idea. I think ultimately, as the infrastructure sits today, it's a bit of a niche product that we'd have to look and see what the impact of the connectivity to the hub actually would be, and then how that might change Seattle's competitiveness relative to other large hub airports.
So you're talking about the fact on the ground that the Tukwila Amtrak station is 5 miles away outside security from Sea-Tac's terminal, as opposed to
connecting over San Francisco.
Yeah, correct. From the flight, you drive to Everett, you fly Everett, San Francisco to Sydney or whatever.
Exactly. So it's a long way of saying it's challenging.
Yeah.
I don't know if this came up during the time I had to step out during the master plan presentation. I'm wondering if we can also start to make sure that we're having, especially in these meetings, having some chunk of conversation around multimodal. I feel like we keep defaulting to airlines, to airports, even though it's in our mission to talk about multimodal. And I think one of the things I hope for, and I will take responsibility for not pushing this issue, and maybe we need another subcommittee or something to just kind of focus on agenda setting. Like I would have, because of everything that's happened up here, and I live here, so maybe that's why I'm super alert to it, is, we have the expansion of light rail now in Linwood and eventually up to here. And, with our commercial airport and general aviation, and maybe be able to talk about how does that impact transportation around here and getting from the east side to over here and down south and eventually points north. So I would have loved if we had somebody here from Sound Transit to talk about the new link light rail and how that's connecting up to here with the rest of the transit and how that contributes to all of this. So again, I don't know if those pieces came up during the master plan discussion, because I know that we talked about it a lot when I was on the airport commission as part of that as well. But to also just kind of making sure that we have maybe in our agenda every time we get together that there's at least some kind of discussion or presentation around not airline, having someone from one of the other multimodal operations out there to kind of talk about what they're doing in this space and in that respective region, if not the state.
Mr. Marcy said that they're trying to get the link line extension routed through the passenger terminal here, but there's no money for it.
Oh, yeah. But that being said, I think it would have still been great, even if they couldn't have come. But to just I just want to make sure that we're not just talking about the one thing, or so we talk about all the things.
Yeah.
Along those lines, there's a very interesting person. Her name is Meredith Richards, and she used to be on the state of Virginia's Department of Transportation. And she has an interesting presentation on why the state of Virginia decided to build an interstate rail network instead of expanding I-95 between Washington, D.C. and Richmond. And her argument is a little bit like, I believe the cost to add another lane each direction between Washington, D.C. and Richmond on I-95 was $50 billion, I believe. And they found out that they could build a reasonably high-speed statewide rail network for far less than that. And that's what they're doing today. And she said, not only that, by the time they got that extra lane built on I-95, that it would be completely congested as soon as it got finished.
Yeah.
So they can move a lot more people faster in a more environmentally friendly manner, more efficiently with their statewide rail network. So they received some grants under the bipartisan infrastructure law that provides $60 billion for rail under different projects. There's some 60 different rail projects right now in the United States. But she would be an interesting presenter, and I think she would, if we're interested in that kind of topic, and she'd do it virtually. I mean, she lives in the Washington, D.C. area, but I think she would do that virtually, and I could probably arrange that if you guys wanted.
I love that idea, actually.
Maybe a 30-minute presentation or something like that.
Well, and that reminds me, I think on our longtime speaker idea list has been the Cascadia high-speed rail folks. We should,
Ron Pate, I'm sure would.
I can get. They already know that they have an open invitation, so whenever we want them on the agenda.
There's a related project in the mill too. I'm not sure if you guys are aware or not, but the Federal Railroad Administration conducted a 2-year study about the restoration of long-distance trains in the United States. They completed that study in January and submitted it to the Congress. There's 15 long-distance routes in that study that are recommended for restoration. One of them is from Chicago to basically through southern Montana to Spokane, Tri-Cities, Yakima, over Stampede Pass to Auburn and then Seattle. So the FRA has a program called the Corridor Identification Program, and which folks could apply for. Well, the state of Montana applied and received a grant from the FRA to begin planning for the restoration of that route, which was discontinued in 1971 or something like that. But at any rate, that's the contractor that's working on that for the state of Montana. And I know Jason Biggs has been working with them on this subject too, so the WashDOT knows what's going on here. But that's another subject. The contractor is David Evans and Associates, who is doing the work for the state of Montana. That's another interesting subject that we could be briefed on that relates to multimodal.
I have, I'm very visual, and asking the question, is there some kind of a map that shows the current different ways of transportation that connects the various parts of the state of Washington? And is there something within the WashDOT strategic plan that speaks to how they're planning to expand the state responsible areas?
I can speak to that for a little
Yes.
bit. Right now, WashDOT Rail Freights and Ports Division is preparing a statewide revision to their state rail plan. It's open for public comment right now, up through June, and that contains a very detailed map of every railroad in the state of Washington. Also, just recently, WashDOT completed a study of expanding statewide state-sponsored bus service, and there are several different routes that are being recommended by WashDOT. Maybe not aware, but right now there is a WashDOT-sponsored state bus plan or routes.
There's like scattered individual routes, and
Yeah,
trying
there's
to kind of
like
make it
Grapevine, the Apple Line, and I've forgotten there's 4 or 5
Douglas Line.
So the idea is to expand some of those, and some of those would have connecting service to passenger rail and airports. So that's another presentation we could get, that kind of multimodal stuff.
And part of what's sparking for me is, so our neighborhood, we're able to capitalize a lot on University of Washington academics and capstone students. And I'm thinking, if we need GPS capacity, that we have all these maps. It's almost like the body, remember? It's so long ago I went to school. You can turn the page and there's cellophane that shows different systems in the body, so we can have a comprehensive sense of what's going on. And I know we still need to dive into the details.
Alan has his hand raised.
Yeah, I just want to follow up on Gary's comments. The Public Transportation Office at WSDOT is finishing up their intercity bus plan. There is efforts moving forward that would extend, I think it's the Grapevine, and connecting Ellensburg all the way to Pasco, where that continues on to Walla Walla. But that would provide improved bus service along that corridor, in addition to efforts that they're also working on I-90 between Spokane and Seattle. So,
I literally just pulled up that map.
yep. So that the discussions on that, and even some stuff we're doing in the Yakima region, might be something we add to the agenda in September.
I mean, it seems like low-hanging fruit to connect the Grapevine, to Yakima Airport, and maybe tag that on. I remember taking the bus from Amtrak to the Redmond, Oregon Airport one time. Just carve them down.
I think the I-5 corridor through WashDOT, their team would be good to connect with. They looked at a lot of different modes of transportation, high-speed rail, flights, but what they're also looking at are the exits that lead on and off. So if you're looking at Sea-Tac Airport, the on and off ramps is what they're looking at, which ones are going to be closed, which ones are open. I think it's really important because then for cities to look at that are considering airports going into their area and their employees, right? If you have a workforce that is really dominant in an area, you want to make sure that they have the transportation from their home to work.
Yeah, airports are huge employers of lower wage workers, and frequently aren't commuting by car
within the community.
Yeah.
Probably some of the discussions about what is here and does work. I had a situation where my situation is beyond my control. As I said, they say I ended up with a car over here in the Sea-Tac parking lot, and I ended up coming back home another route, so I had to come into Seattle just to get the car to drive it back. But I was able to pay, $40, less than 12 hours beforehand to hop on a Flixbus. Once I got into the congested part of town, it hopped into the carpool lane, dropped me off right at Sea-Tac, and at Sea-Tac I hopped the shuttle to the parking lot with the car and came back. So I was able to do a full round trip in from Moses Lake and all the way back out in a little more than 6 hours. So there is some transportation there already. The question is whether or not are people going to use it, and does there need to be something available for the people who 40 bucks just I can't swing $40.
Yeah, and the visibility of that, like I'm going to do that, you're going to do that, et cetera. But like,
Is it obvious enough to people that they can access it?
Yeah. He said he didn't show us. He wasn't parked at church. I was just checking to make sure you weren't parked at his airport.
Oh no, when I park at the airport, I get the validation, so I don't have to pay them.
That's honest.
Just checking.
I'm kidding mostly.
Does anyone else have anything to kind of? Thank you for bringing up the idea that we also just have a talk about stuff, but we don't have to keep talking about stuff. If anyone doesn't have any other stuff to talk about.
Did we have a task for the HEAL Act portion, or was it just looking at the bill itself and reading through
Maria
it?
said she was talking about getting someone to present.
Oh, got it.
Yeah, at the July.
I wasn't quite sure if we were done with that.
Presenting on it at the July meeting, but then also just read the text of it. It's written in. It's a recently enough written statute that it's pretty readable.
Yeah. As
opposed to a very old statute. The language is not readable.
So I apologize, but I just remembered something else that probably this group is interested in. Another thing that came out of the legislative session that just ended, and this didn't come through our office, so admittedly, I know nothing about this. But there is a proviso, which is basically like an earmark, that the legislature gave funding to Evergreen State College to do a study on ways to reduce demand for air travel out of Seattle. I've tried everything I can think of to call somebody at Evergreen that knows who's doing that, whose idea was, what they're trying to do, and I can't find anybody that knows anything about it. But somebody must, because somebody asked for that money. So you're nodding, Evan. Do you know anything about that?
I'm nodding. Like I think this was mentioned before that was out there.
It was previously, and it came kind of through the governor's office. And at that point, I reached out to the governor's office and said, "Who's doing this? We'd like to talk." And
They'd ask us to use them as one of our sources, the previous one.
Right.
And we didn't know who the source,
Right.
They didn't know who it was that we were supposed to go to.
So it's there now.
How much money?
It's only $90,000, but if it's a university doing it, maybe that's what it costs. I don't know.
Bunch of grad students doing some credit work with that amounts to it.
But it also means there's somebody out there that wanted to do that and has an interest and asked. So
let's
at
give them
some
a
point-
task.
Yeah.
Is the idea reducing demand by moving it elsewhere or by like?
It doesn't say.
I think we can presume. Yeah. Yeah, you can figure out why. All right. Is there anyone else want to talk about stuff? We can let.
Just talking about speakers, so July we're going to have one that Maria's putting together.
And
September we would have probably somebody at Yakima talking to us about history the CAWG work did. It'd be Rob Hodgman or Warren Hendricks or one or the other or both. Do we need another one in there?
Well, and Yakima Airport's master plan and interest in being part of the solution. And so the November is we don't have anybody yet.
somewhere in here, we could get Ron Tate and to talk to us about what's going on with their high-speed rail.
So that's November?
That could be November, or that could be July, if for some reason the FAA is not available. Busy.
WashDOT got 2 grants, rail-related grants. One is to study the feasibility of high-speed rail between Vancouver Beach City and Seattle and Portland. And they got another grant to basically complete the service development plan for the Amtrak Cascades, which envisions up to 14 round trips per day between Seattle and Spokane, somewhere to the tune of 2.5 hours each way. So those 2 are active grants. The third one is the one I spoke about that Montana got for the long distance route study between Chicago and Seattle. So there's 3 rail related grants active here right now.
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
That reminds me, I don't want to be speaking out of turn, but just a heads up, this is kind of like current events update for all this group that we're dealing with. We just got word from the state attorney general's office that the state can't right now accept any federal grants that include new federal grant conditions, particularly having to do with state or local government employees assisting ICE with deportation, assisting the federal government. New grant language requires that we do that. So I just want everybody to know that all talk about, oh yeah, we're going to be getting a grant to do this stuff. I don't know what's going to happen. There may be an injunction, so everything goes along as planned. But it may be that federal funding in Washington State gets turned off here pretty soon. So just kind of a heads up. Watch the news and see what's going on.
I just sent everyone a Google form where they can submit ideas for agenda setting.
I was wondering if part of our report is talking about, I mean, it's not really, eco travel is 2026 as far as a lot of the conferences I went to so far, and airlines talking about, the rates that they'll be setting as far as having these Uber hoppers. Are we talking, when we're talking commercial aviation, are we talking sustainable aviation fuels? Are we talking about electrification? Because that's going to then and hydrogen. I mean, those are all community factors that we're dealing with right now, talking about these other items as well. Is this a part of what this working group will be adding into their report, or having a part of it, or will it not be?
So it would be useful to talk about some of the initiatives that the airlines are actually doing to reduce carbon emissions over the next 5 to 10 years.
Yeah.
Actually, I might propose that we, at a future agenda, we make that be the day, because it would be awesome to hear about what the airlines are doing. Also within my shop, not the airline stuff, but kind of electric charging stations for aircraft and the smaller type of aircraft. I'm really proud of my shop, but Washington State is a leader in states about preparing for that. So it'd be great to talk about all of that.
Mike mentioned that Rob Hodgman, who's the Yakima Airport Director, has applied for grants for electric charging stations. He's got a group, and I've forgotten who all's involved at Yakima Airport and Chehalis, I think. They're all planning for electric charging.
For electric aircraft.
For electric aircraft.
Yeah.
He's already had meetings, I know, with Pacific Power, who's the utility provider over there at Yakima Airport, to provide 400 kW or something like that to charge these airplanes. So he's got them all mapped out on the airport plan and where they're going to be and all that kind of stuff.
We spend a lot of time supporting airports on those efforts as well, whether it's grants or just general installation of those things. And I was just saying, man, I think it might be worthwhile to have our head of sustainability come in to this group about how we support the airports and their and other places in their infrastructure growth, as well as just the other staff and electrification, and hydrogen, the investments that we're making in that front.
Great to hear also the transition you made to biofuels from regulars.
Yeah.
Just sharing information, the update to the King County Sea-Tac Action Plan is, the plan will be submitted over to Council June 2nd. It includes, aviation greenhouse reduction based on the Joint Aviation Task Force review of strategies and tactics to reduce aviation. As you all know, a lot of it is long-term. At some point when I get the report, I'll send it over to you. It doesn't impact the big picture, it impacts the small picture.
Anything else anyone want to discuss?
I think the big question is, Jeff, did you pass your driver's test?
Oh, yeah. It was the human smuggling that I was working on. No, we're all good.
Yeah, now you can take it.
That's it. I'm ready. Yeah, so I'm just here. Wait, I'm on your schedule.
You'd get a C-, so just.
Yeah, it's still a pass.
Parallel parking, right? All right. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
Right. Second.
Favor?
Aye.
All right. Okay, we're adjourned.
Thank you, everybody.
All right.
Thank you.